Chapter 31-32. At this moment, Xiao Lao gave off a completely different vibe. In particular, the sword fanatic had never seen such sword intent before. Wisps of blood-red sword chi kept emerging from his sword. These sword chi were filled with strong fighting spirit. "Watch out, I'm coming." With a low growl, Xiao Lao charged towards the sword fanatic. Although the sword fanatic felt that Xiao Lao was a little strange, he had no intention of backing down. He also charged forward and fought fiercely with him. The battle between the two was absolutely fierce. The experts from Emperor Dong's palace who were watching from the side broke out in cold sweat. These two little guys were a little too strong. No wonder they were Xiao Qin's sons. Their strength could not be judged by common sense. Xiao Lao's identity was no secret to the experts from Emperor Dong's palace. They all knew that Xiao Lao and Xiao Yao were Xiao Qin's sons. Moreover, judging from Xiao Lao's fighting style, it was obvious that he had inherited Xiao Qin's teachings. However, compared to Xiao Qin, Xiao Lao's sword principle was a little different. It had its own flavor. In the fierce battle between the two, Xiao Yao and Jian both ended their battles. The two were lucky to have encountered opponents with average strength. They ended their battles without much effort and successfully won a victory. For the time being, there was no next battle scheduled. The two came to the place where Xiao Lao and the sword fanatic were fighting and watched. In addition to Xiao Yao and Jian, many people had already gathered around. In the first round of the competition, the battle between Xiao Lao and the sword fanatic was undoubtedly the most eye-catching and also the most eye-catching one. Brother Xiao Yao. Seeing Xiao Yao, Jian took the initiative to greet him. In response, Xiao Yao smiled slightly. Standing side by side, Jian looked at the two people who were fighting fiercely and asked curiously, "Brother Xiao Lao's fighting style seems a little different from usual." Xiao Lao is showing his true abilities this time. In the first and second round, he was holding back. Xiao Yao didn't try to hide it. After all, there was nothing to hide. It was the truth. Oh, hearing that, Jian looked at Jian curiously. Knowing what he wanted to ask, Xiao Yao spoke before he could. "Brother Jian, you are also a sword cultivator. Do you know what my father taught us the most? It's not the so-called sword moves. Sword moves grow stronger, but true sword cultivators don't rely too much on sword moves. That's just the lowest level of cultivation. Father has always told us that swords are the same as people. Everyone's sword is different. He has said many times that we are Xiao Qin's sons, but we should have our own way of the sword. Only when you find your own way of the sword can you be considered the strongest sword cultivator. Xiao Lao's sword is born for battle." This was the first time Jian had heard Xiao Yao's words. Was this the cultivation method that Xiao Qin taught the two brothers? Looking at the two people fighting fiercely in the arena, Jian realized that although he was talented, he couldn't compare with Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao in some aspects. The biggest difference was that the two of them had a father who was almost divine in the way of the sword. Based on this point alone, Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao had a much higher starting point than ordinary people. Moreover, judging from Xiao Yao's current fighting style, he had indeed found his own way of the sword, and it was the most suitable one for him. The sword intent was mixed with a strong fighting spirit. The more Xiao Lao fought, the braver and more excited he became. It was as if fighting was the happiest thing in the world for him. There was an excited smile on his face. The sword fanatic's strength was finally enough for Xiao Lao to fight without caring about the consequences. "Brother sword fanatic, you really didn't disappoint me. You didn't let me down by standing here for so long." The sword fanatic was a good opponent. There was no better opponent than him. Xiao Lao felt very comfortable fighting with him. Similarly, when facing Xiao Lao, the sword fanatic was also focused on the battle. To him, Xiao Lao was also his dream opponent. He had been obsessed with the way of the sword all his life. He didn't care about anything else and didn't want to pay attention to it. Now that he could meet such an opponent, it was the happiest thing for him. "Xiao Qin, your son is getting stronger and stronger. And that little guy called the sword fanatic is also quite strong." On the high platform, all the kings were also paying attention to the battle. It was because the battle between Xiao Lao and the sword fanatic in the first round was too attractive. Compared to the others, the two of them were stronger and more intense. Hearing Qing Lin's words, Xiao Chun smiled slightly. Xiao Lao was quite strong, and so was the sword fanatic. Among his peers, the sword fanatic was probably the first person to force Xiao Lao into such a situation. Also, I heard that the sword fanatic has always wanted to be your disciple. He's such an excellent disciple. Aren't you tempted at all? Before Xiao Chun could reply, Qing Lin continued. He didn't know where he heard this from. However, Xiao Chun had never thought about taking in a disciple and didn't care much about it. Now that he heard Qing Lin mention it, he looked at the sword fanatic in the arena. Xiao Chun was a little interested. This was indeed a good seedling. He was also very devoted to the way of the sword. With a little training, he should be able to become a good swordsman. He didn't know that he had attracted Xiao Chen's attention and that Xiao Chen really did want to take him in as a disciple. At this moment, the sword fanatic was completely focused on the battle with Xiao Lao. Xiao Lao was so strong that the sword fanatic couldn't afford to be careless. He couldn't afford to be distracted at all. As time passed and the battle continued, the sword fanatic realized that he was gradually at a disadvantage. His sword essence was constantly being consumed and weakened. However, Xiao Lao's sword essence was constantly being consumed. On the other hand, Xiao Lao's sword essence was constantly increasing, especially the battle intent in the sword essence. One side was constantly consuming his sword essence, while the other side was getting stronger and stronger. After this, the sword fanatic would definitely be at a disadvantage. However, the sword fanatic couldn't do anything about it. His sword essence was different from Xiao Lao's strange sword essence. He couldn't do this at all. Even when their sword realms collided, the sword fanatic was at a disadvantage. If this continued, the sword fanatic will be defeated sooner or later. There was no chance for him to win. Xiao Lao also noticed this. His hands didn't stop moving as he looked at the sword fanatic seriously. Do you know why you can't win against me? Why? Because compared to me, you lack one thing. You haven't found your own way of the sword. Your swords are all learned from the swords of your ancestors. Although they are integrated, they are all shadows of others. They don't belong to you. This is the reason why you can't win against me. Please add, vote, recommend. Chapter 31-33. Xiao Lao said calmly. Up until now, both of them had given it their all. Various powerful martial arts techniques were used by both of them. Such a huge battle shocked many of the spectating Sky Prides. Their colleagues had also determined that both of them were the greatest threats. After all, in terms of strength, Xiao Lao and the Sword Maniac had already reached the peak of the younger generation in the eastern region. No one dared to say that they could defeat both of them. Even so, the scales of victory were gradually tilting. The Sword Maniac found it harder and harder to defend against Xiao Lao's attacks. I still haven't found my own sword Dao. Xiao Lao's words kept echoing in his mind. In Xiao Lao's opinion, the Sword Maniac was already extremely outstanding in all aspects and was not inferior to him at all. However, he had yet to find a final answer on the path of Sword Dao. It was understandable that he would follow the path of his predecessors. It was indeed much easier and would allow him to grow faster. However, this was only imitating others. This path was not enough for one to reach the true peak. Since ancient times, which true expert had succeeded by imitating their ancestors. That was why Xiao Lao said that if the Sword Maniac had not found his own sword Dao, then he would not be his opponent. Although the Sword Maniac was still trying his best to defend himself, the gap between the two of them was getting bigger and bigger. Is this what Senior Xiao Chen taught him? He knew that Xiao Chen taught Xiao Luo all of this. No wonder he was the man he respected. He was strong, and his understanding of swordsmanship was even more difficult for others to compare. On the high platform, the various kings who had been watching the battle began to speak one after another. It seems like the outcome has been decided. Although the Sword Maniac is not bad, there is still a gap between him and Xiao Lao. That's right. Unless the Sword Maniac can make a breakthrough, there won't be any more surprises. With the king's eyesight, it was not difficult to see that the battle between Xiao Lao and the Sword Maniac was almost over. The sword maniac would also find it difficult to continue fighting against Xiao Lao. Everyone knew the answer in their hearts. Only Xiao Chen revealed a faint smile. Everything is still unknown until the end. You think the sword maniac still has a chance? Hearing this, Lin Yun, who was at the side, laughed. Judging from the current situation, the sword fanatic's defeat was basically a fact. She really didn't know where Xiao Chen's confidence came from. Xiao Chen merely smiled in response, but did not say anything. Xiao Chen was very clear about the gap between the two of them, but did the sword maniac really not have a chance? That wasn't necessarily the case. It was just very difficult. While everyone was talking, the battle on the stage had finally reached its final moment. Xiao Lao slashed out with his sword. The sword maniac tried his best to block, but he was still forced back a few steps. Faced with such an opportunity, Xiao Lao would definitely not miss it. He raised his sword again and said in a deep voice, "It's over, sword fanatic." It was indeed over. The sword maniac could not block this strike, nor could he block it. However, the sword maniac turned a deaf ear to such a sure-lose sword strike. He just kept muttering to himself, "My own sword Dao? What is my sword Dao? Why do I practice swordsmanship?" The sword maniac's heart was now filled with countless questions. All kinds of questions kept appearing in his mind. It was as if, after so many years of cultivation, the sword maniac only began to search for answers now. Outsiders did not know what the sword maniac was thinking. Only Xiao Chun, who was on the high platform, had a strange smile on his face. He's going to lose. Even the sword maniac is no match for him. This person is very strong. Seeing that even the sword maniac was defeated by Xiao Lao, several powerful supreme sky prides looked at Xiao Lao with a hint of fear in their eyes. If the sword maniac was no match for him, what about them? Would they be able to defeat Xiao Lao? Thinking about it from another perspective, no one had an answer in their hearts. They didn't even think that they had a high chance of winning. Everyone had different thoughts, but they couldn't change the outcome on the stage. However, just as Xiao Lao's sword was about to land on the sword maniac, Xiao Lao, who was originally calm, suddenly had a strange look in his eyes. It was as if he had sensed something. Just as the sword was about to hit the sword maniac, the sword maniac suddenly raised his Jian Yi to block it. Just when everyone thought that the sword maniac had won, the sword maniac actually blocked it. At the same time, the sword maniac's aura was completely different. It even gave off a completely different feeling from before. How is that possible? It's impossible for him to block it. Faced with such an outcome, the crowd found it hard to accept. In their opinion, the sword maniac was already an arrow at the end of its flight. It would be very difficult for him to block Xiao Lao's sword. What exactly happened? Furthermore, where was the sword maniac's aura? Why couldn't I feel it all? The sharp sword intent from before had actually disappeared without a trace. Of course, it didn't really disappear. Instead, the sword maniac had completed his transformation. He had found the answer that he had been ignoring all this time. He had found his own path. I just purely like swords. It's my everything. That's why I'm called the sword maniac. There's nothing special about my swordsmanship. It's the purest. The sword maniac looked calmly at Xiao Lao and said plainly, he didn't practice swordsmanship for anything else. He wasn't like Xiao Lao, who treated swordsmanship as a way to become stronger or as a way to fight others. The sword maniac's only reason for practicing swordsmanship was because he liked it. Therefore, his swordsmanship was the purest form of swordsmanship. It was because he liked it. That was all. There was no other reason. Hearing this, Xiao Lao, who was stunned, quickly revealed a smile. He didn't expect this guy to find the answer so quickly. But this is more interesting. The purest form of swordsmanship. Then, compare to me, who's stronger and who's weaker. Facing the sword maniac who had undergone a transformation, Xiao Lao became even more excited. His sword intent instantly skyrocketed. Even the battle intent in his sword intent skyrocketed at this moment. He was excited as if he had seen his prey. Xiao Lao still had such a strong power even after the battle. Just how strong was this guy? However, facing Xiao Lao, whose strength had skyrocketed again, the sword maniac didn't change his expression at all. After finding the answer, the sword maniac's state of mind had also completely improved. Your swordsmanship is for battle. My swordsmanship is just for the sake of it. Come, let me see how strong you are now. Xiao Lao took a step forward and instantly appeared in front of the sword maniac. He swung his sword. In response, the sword maniac seemed to have made a normal move. However, he blocked Xiao Lao's attack with extreme precision. It seemed that the two of them had returned to a state where they were evenly matched. The sword maniac, who was previously suppressed by Xiao Lao, was now able to exchange blows with Xiao Lao. He didn't seem to be at a disadvantage at all. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 31-34. Xiao Lao and the sword maniac both attacked crazily. However, at this point in time, the attacks of the two gave off the most primitive and pure feeling. Every slash of the sword was extremely simple. It was the most basic of sword moves, such as slashing, stabbing, and so on. Moreover, there wasn't any terrifying power. However, the more it was so, the more the spectators frowned. This was because these basic sword moves had completely sublimated in the hands of Xiao Lao and the sword maniac. What was their strongest move? Was it those terrifying, sacred, and ancestral-level martial arts techniques? Obviously not. The stronger a martial artist was, the less they relied on martial arts techniques. This was because a casual strike from them had already surpassed many powerful martial skills. Just like the current Xiao Chun and the sword maniac, they didn't care about martial arts techniques at all. This was because their casual attacks were the most powerful martial arts techniques. Martial arts techniques had fixed routines and cultivation methods. No matter how powerful a martial arts technique was, it had its own loopholes and shortcomings. Only by breaking this shackle would one be able to undergo a true transformation. This was the current Xiao Lao and the sword maniac. They had indeed broken their own shackles. When they attacked, they were no longer restricted by martial arts techniques. However, even so, their attacks didn't decrease, but instead increased. Especially the sword maniac. After comprehending his own sword principle, his strength could be said to have improved by leaps and bounds. From being suppressed by Xiao Lao to being on par with him now, it could be said that he had improved tremendously. Their figures were almost nowhere to be seen in the arena. As time passed, their battle became more and more intense. It's already been 4 to 5 hours. There's still no winner between the two of them? The strength of these two is almost the same. It won't be that easy to determine the winner. I didn't expect the first round to be so exciting. The strength of these two is enough to be ranked in the top 10 of the Hidden Dragon list. I don't know if it's good luck or bad that they met in the first round. At this point, only Xiao Lao and the sword maniac were left in the first round of battle. In the face of the battle prowess displayed by the two of them, many people felt powerless. With their strength, they had no chance of winning against the two of them. However, there were still some powerful geniuses. While watching the two of them fight, other than fear in his eyes, there was also an inexplicable fighting spirit. They were all people with extraordinary combat abilities. Their goal was to be in the top 10 of the Hidden Dragon rank. Now, Xiao Lao and the sword maniac were definitely qualified to be in the top 10. Therefore, unknowingly, he had become their opponent. In the following competition, everyone would definitely encounter such an opponent. Without a doubt, no one dared to be the slightest bit careless. I really want to fight with these two. Huh, you think you can win? If you don't try it for yourself, who knows? Everyone's eyes fell on the battle between the two, including Xiao Chun, Lin Yun, Qing Lin, and the others on the high platform. Xiao Chun, are you really not going to take in a disciple? This sword fanatic is a good seedling. That's right. If I hadn't heard that he only wanted to acknowledge you as his master, I would have accepted him. You? Forget it. You don't know swordsmanship. Wouldn't you be harming others if you took him in? All the kings were very optimistic about the sword fanatic. With the talent he had shown, it was certain that he would break through to the divine ancestor realm in the future. If he had enough opportunities, it was not impossible for him to reach the divine ancestor realm in a few rounds. Naturally, no one wanted to miss such a good seedling. Unfortunately, the sword fanatic was only interested in Xiao Chun. He had never thought of acknowledging anyone as his master. There were many sword cultivators in Emperor Dong's palace. However, in terms of cultivation and swordsmanship, Xiao Chun was undoubtedly the strongest. That was for sure. If he wanted to acknowledge someone as his master, he would definitely acknowledge the strongest person. That was the sword fanatic's idea. If the person was not the strongest, he would rather not acknowledge him. Everyone chatted casually. Xiao Chun watched the battle between the two indifferently. He did not give any response. No one knew what he was thinking. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the situation on the stage finally changed. After a long and fierce battle, Xiao Lao and the sword fanatic had consumed a lot of energy. At this time, both of them knew that it was time to decide the winner. After such a long and fierce battle, it was still difficult to determine the winner. Now that both of them had consumed a lot of energy, it was time to decide the winner. Haha, refreshing. Sword fanatic, let's decide the winner. Xiao Lao laughed heartily and spoke first. Although Xiao Lao was very happy to stand with the sword fanatic, he enjoyed it very much. However, since the battle had reached this stage, it was time to decide the winner. The sword fanatic did not reply. He only mobilized the last of his strength. His aura rose steadily as he responded with his actions. It's time to decide the winner. Is it finally the final moment? Feeling the aura of the two rising again, the surrounding people watched intently. No one wanted to miss this exciting final battle. Xiao Lao and the sword fanatic, the two top sword geniuses of the younger generation in the eastern region. Who would be stronger? Almost at the same time, they each slashed out their strongest sword. The two swords collided fiercely in the air. Cracks appeared in the space, like a mirror that was about to shatter. The space is about to shatter. Seeing this scene, everyone was shocked. With one blow, even the space of the hidden dragon realm was about to shatter. It was obvious how powerful the blow was. With the collision of the swords, countless sword lights rose and instantly shrouded the two figures. Shrouded by the sword lights, for a moment, no one knew what was happening in the arena. One by one, they spoke anxiously. Who won? I can't see it all. I can't even feel their aura. Damn it. Who won and who lost? In such an exciting battle, the winner was naturally the result that everyone was most concerned about. What was the final outcome? After fighting fiercely for several hours, the last 15 minutes became the most torturous time for everyone. Because of the sword lights, no one could see what was happening in the arena. After a full 15 minutes, the sword lights in the arena slowly dissipated. At this moment, countless people's eyes were wide open. They wanted to see what the final result was. Under everyone's attention, Xiao Lao and the sword fanatic stood proudly in the half-destroyed arena. They were still holding their long swords tightly in their hands. No one could tell who had won. It seemed to be a tie. Under such a terrifying attack, the two of them still could not decide the winner? That's impossible, right? Even an ancient life form expert wouldn't be able to receive that attack without being injured. Please add it to your collection. Monthly votes recommended. Chapter 31-35. After the last strike, Xiao Lao and the sword maniac did not fall. They had been fighting for several hours since they stepped into the arena. During this time, they did not hold back at all. Both of them had used up a lot of energy, but even so, they had fought to this point. Was there still no winner? They wanted to see something from the two's expressions, but unfortunately, they were all in the same state. Because at this moment, both Xiao Lao and the sword maniac did not have any extra expressions on their faces. They were still extremely calm. It was as if the battle just now had nothing to do with them at all. Under everyone's gaze, the sword maniac finally turned his head slightly and looked at the high platform where Xiao Chun and the others were. A rare smile appeared on his face. The sword maniac did not hold back in this battle. He even broke through his own limits and successfully comprehended his own sword Dao. It was a very satisfying battle. Xiao Lao was indeed the son of Senior Xiao Chun. He was the strongest sword cultivator of the same generation that he had ever met. He had given his all and did not hold back at all. This kind of performance should be able to attract Senior Xiao Chun's attention, right? That's right. At the last moment, the sword maniac no longer cared about the outcome. The only thing he cared about was whether Xiao Chun saw this battle. As he thought of this, the sword maniac's vision turned black and his body fell straight down. He was seriously injured and unconscious. But even so, until the last moment, the sword maniac still had a faint smile on his face. The outcome has been decided. Did Xiao Lao win? Even the sword maniac is no match for him. No, look at Xiao Lao. The moment the sword maniac fell, almost everyone thought that the outcome had been decided. Someone as strong as the sword maniac was still no match for Xiao Lao. He was definitely the biggest dark horse in this year's Hidden Dragon leaderboard. However, just as everyone was thinking this, someone suddenly shouted, "Don't worry." Looking over, they saw that at the same time the sword maniac fell, Xiao Lao fell as well. Like the sword maniac, he had reached his limit. It was normal for such an intense battle to end like this. It was a breathtaking battle, but in the end, both of them ended in a draw. Their battle prowess had convinced everyone present. Even those top prodigies who boasted that they were not weaker than the sword maniac and Xiao Lao could not help but admire them in the face of such a battle. I really want to go up against these two. Haha, this is the atmosphere that the Hidden Dragon ranking should have. Only the true geniuses are worthy of the title Hidden Dragon. All the Sky Prides were completely affected by the battle between Xiao Lao and the Sword Fanatic. As the two of them fell, the expert from Emperor Dong's palace who was in charge of the referee shouted loudly, "A draw." Even he couldn't help but want to applaud this battle. Soon, specialized people carried the two of them down. However, from the looks of it, the two of them had consumed a lot of energy, but it didn't matter. Naturally, there would be people from Emperor Dong's palace to treat them. When it came to the ranking battles, everything became extremely fair. Even if one was seriously injured in a battle and consumed a lot of energy, there was no need to worry about the next battle. This was because all the battles would only continue after one had fully recovered. This also ensured that every battle would be held in one's best state. To a large extent, it prevented other factors from interfering with the final victory. To put it bluntly, the ranking battles of the Hidden Dragon ranking battles only depended on one's strength and nothing else. Without strength, it would be impossible for one to take advantage of the situation. Xiao Lao and the Sword Fanatics battle was temporarily postponed, but the others' battles were still held as scheduled. Perhaps it was because of the previous battle between the two of them. When the second round of the competition began, many of the Sky Prides were very eager to battle. Yinran felt like she wanted to fight against the heavens and earth. There were even some top prodigies who met each other. Just like the Sword Fanatic and Xiao Lao, they presented the crowd with another fierce battle. After glancing at the second round of the competition, Xiao Chun, who was on the high platform, turned around and was about to leave. Seeing this, Lin Yun, who was beside him, laughed. "Why? Are you tempted? Do you want to see your precious disciple? Mind your own business." Lin Yun could tell at a glance what Xiao Chun wanted to do, so she teased him. In response, Xiao Chun laughed and scolded her. He took a step forward, and his figure instantly disappeared from the spot. "My lord." When he arrived at the place where Xiao Lao and the Sword Fanatic were recuperating, there were already experts from Emperor Dong's palace taking care of their injuries. With the help of the experts from Emperor Dong's palace, the two of them would be able to recover in the shortest time possible and would not have any impact on the Hidden Dragon ranking. In response to the crowd's greetings, Xiao Chen nodded slightly and walked into the room. He looked at the two of them lying on the bed and said calmly, "Let me do it." Xiao Chun personally treated the two of them, which stunned everyone present. This treatment was too good. As the emperor of Emperor Dong's palace, Xiao Chun actually treated them personally. Even so, no one dared to disobey Xiao Chen's orders. They stopped what they were doing and respectfully retreated outside. After everyone left, Xiao Chun took out 2 elixir pills and personally fed them to the two of them. He then activated his spiritual energy to help the two of them refine the power of the elixir pills. These 2 elixir pills were definitely not ordinary. One of them was more than enough to treat the two of them. In addition to Xiao Chen's help, the elixir pills quickly took effect. Xiao Lao and the Sword Fanatics' faces quickly became rosy. Moreover, the injuries on their bodies also quickly dissipated. As for the wounds that were originally difficult to heal due to the remnants of their respective sword essences, they were easily wiped out by Shao Chun. Shao Chen's sword was able to easily erase all traces of the sword. Without the remnants of the sword will, the wound was able to heal in an instant. In about 15 minutes, the two of them had recovered by 80%. At the same time, their eyelids trembled slightly, and they woke up one after another. "Father." When Xiao Lao opened his eyes and saw Shao Chen in front of him, he called out happily. He did not expect his father to come personally. On the other hand, the sword fanatic suddenly felt a little uneasy facing Shao Chun at such a close distance. He did not know where to put his hands, let alone what to say at this moment. He had always wanted to be Shao Chen's disciple. However, when he saw Shao Chun in person, the sword fanatic helplessly realized that he was nervous even when he spoke. He did not know when it started, but the sword fanatic had regarded Shao Chun as his idol and goal. He had been chasing after Shao Chen's back, wanting to get closer to him. However, now Shao Chun was sitting in front of him. The sword fanatic felt that all of this was so surreal that it made him feel like it was just a dream. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 31-36. Seeing the sword fanatic's nervous expression, Xiao Luo, who was at the side, laughed and teased. "What's wrong? Haven't you always wanted to see my father? Why aren't you saying anything now that you've seen him?" The sword fanatic stammered for a long time, but he couldn't say a word. This kid usually looked carefree, but he didn't expect him to have such a side to him when he met Shao Chun. Shao Chun didn't make things difficult for the sword fanatic. Seeing him like this, he smiled and said, "You didn't do much. You didn't do much. Keep up the good work." Shao Chun gave the sword fanatic a little encouragement. Then he got up and left. The two little guys' injuries were completely healed, and they could continue with the competition. Shao Chun didn't need to stay any longer. Seeing Shao Chun leave, the sword fanatic was both annoyed and excited. What annoyed him the most was that he was unable to utter a single word in front of Shao Chun. He had already decided to become Shao Chen's disciple, but he failed to do so when such a good opportunity was right in front of him. This made the sword fanatic very annoyed, and he cursed himself countless times in his heart. On the other hand, he was excited because Shao Chun had encouraged him, which meant that Shao Chun had seen everything that he had done. After working hard for such a long time, he was finally getting closer to Shao Chun. This made the sword fanatic very excited. "Hey, my father has already left. Why are you still so excited? I really don't understand. You didn't say anything when he was here. Now that he's gone, you're acting like this." Xiao Lao was speechless when he saw the sword fanatic's constantly changing expression. This guy was really strange. He had already helped him, but he didn't say anything. The sword fanatic didn't care about Xiao Lao's words. Hearing this, he smiled foolishly. "I'll definitely get good results. When the time comes, I'll definitely become Senior Shao Chen's disciple. I won't embarrass Senior." As he spoke, he clenched his fists tightly, as if he was cheering for himself. Looking at the sword fanatic's expression, Xiao Lao was completely speechless. What was going on with this weirdo? "Let's go. Let's continue with the competition." The sword fanatic got up and stretched a little. He immediately walked out of the room, full of energy, and went straight to the arena. The battle did not stop for even a moment. Even if some people were injured, the others continued to fight as scheduled. In any case, every battle would be recorded by the experts of Emperor Dong's palace. In the end, they would only need to rank the participants according to their accumulated points. Moreover, this rule ensured fairness to the greatest extent. Xiao Lao and the sword maniac went up to the ring once again. In the next few matches, both of them won easily. They didn't encounter any strong opponents. Or rather, with their strength, there were only a few young geniuses who could cause trouble for them. However, they hadn't met yet, so Xiao Lao and the sword maniac's victory could be said to be very easy, without the slightest pressure. The competition continued one round after another. However, obviously, none of the battles could be compared to the one between Xiao Lao and the sword maniac. There were no evenly matched battles. Even if there were, it was far less exciting than the one between Xiao Lao and the sword maniac. As the competition continued, the points began to show a trend of polarization. The few powerful geniuses, such as Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, the sword maniac, and Jian Yi, were all leading the hidden dragon leaderboard. Their points were basically double that of the second group. With such a gap in points, there was basically no hope of catching up. The gap between the top 10 of the hidden dragon leaderboard and the other geniuses gradually began to show. Because of this, the battles that everyone was paying attention to were the fierce battles between the top 10 geniuses of the hidden dragon leaderboard. This kind of battle was the most attractive. After the number theory competition, a battle soon attracted everyone's attention. Xiao Yao versus Jian. The collision between the two of them made everyone excited. After all, based on the current situation, Xiao Yao was definitely not weak. As for Jian Yi, he was one of the two geniuses of the Jian family who was as famous as the sword maniac. It was said that his strength was actually not weaker than the sword maniac. Of course, now that the sword maniac had comprehended his own sword principle, it was hard to say whether Jian Yi could still compete with the sword maniac. However, no matter what, the clash between a famous sky pride and a sky pride that had risen like a comet attracted a lot of attention. They walked into the arena one after another. Unlike Xiao Lao and the sword maniac, Xiao Yao and Jian Yi were very calm. They did not reveal much fighting spirit. On the contrary, they had a helpless and bitter smile on their faces. It was as if they did not want to fight at all. I didn't expect the two of us to fight so soon. I didn't expect it either, so this should be a tough battle. But it's just a matter of time. To be honest, compared to your brother, I want to fight with you more, Jian Yi said calmly. Obviously, he was more interested in Xiao Yao than Xiao Lao. After all, Xiao Lao's character was very simple. He was aggressive and impulsive. Jian Yi could easily see through such a person. Moreover, Xiao Lao was very strong. Jian Yi knew this without having to fight. However, Xiao Yao was different. In Jian Yi's eyes, Xiao Yao was like a deep well. He could not see through Xiao Yao at all. He did not know how strong Xiao Yao was. Although Xiao Yao admitted that he was no match for Xiao Lao in terms of strength and talent. However, Jian Yi did not believe this. In other words, from a certain perspective, Xiao Yao was even more dangerous than Xiao Lao. As if he had guessed what Jian Yi was thinking, Xiao Yao shook his head helplessly. You don't have to make wild guesses. In terms of strength, I am no match for my brother. This is a fact. Oh, if that's the case, when you fight with Xiao Luo, the one who loses will definitely be you? Hearing this, Jian Yi smiled faintly. Xiao Yao did not refute this. He just said calmly, if it's a normal fight, Xiao Lao is indeed better than me. However, if it's a fight to the death, he will be the one to die. Xiao Yao's words confused everyone for a moment. For example, the sword maniac, who had already arrived at the foot of the stage, was very puzzled. I'm obviously not as strong as you. Why would you be the one to die in a fight to the death? The sword maniac asked Xiao Lao, who was beside him. He was a little confused. However, Xiao Lao said gloomily, my cultivation talent is indeed greater than my brother's, but he also has his own specialties. When the two of us exchange pointers, it's true that I win more than I lose, but I know that if we really use our trump cards to fight, the one who dies is most likely to be me. Please add, please vote, please recommend. End of chapter. Chapter 31-37. Although Xiao Lao was weaker in terms of talent and strength, he admitted that if they fought to the death, he would most likely be the one to die. Sword Maniac was even more confused when he heard this. Why? Looking at Sword Maniac's confused face, Xiao Lao grinned. You'll know soon enough. Anyway, my brother's not that simple. Is that so? Jian Yi's strength is no weaker than mine. Sword Maniac murmured softly. While they were talking, the two people in the arena finally made their moves. Both of them drew out their long swords. Sword essence rose around Jian Yi as he looked at Xiao Yao. However, at this moment, Xiao Yao did not change in the slightest. In fact, he did not even burst forth with his aura. He just stood there calmly, without any intention of making a move. Is he underestimating me? Or was there some other reason? Even so, Jian did not dare to be careless. This was because the feeling that Xiao Yao gave him at this moment had changed. Xiao Yao no longer had that lazy and indifferent appearance from before. The current Xiao Yao was more like a sharp sword that had been drawn, but not unleashed. No, he was not a sword. He was more like a scabbard that could contain and control all the sharp swords in the world. Wasn't this interesting? The two brothers, Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao, were brothers. The younger brother, Xiao Lao, was like a sharp, unsheathed sword. The older brother, Xiao Yao, was like a scabbard, unfathomable. You would never know how many tricks he had up his sleeves. The two brothers had one thing in common. They were equally powerful. That's right. Even though they had not fought, Jian could already feel Xiao Yao's power. It was a power that was completely different from Xiao Lao's. Be careful. Jian took a deep breath. No matter what, the battle had already begun. He couldn't back out without a fight. Moreover, this was the hidden dragon list. Even with Jian Yi's personality, he wanted to get a good result. Moreover, he had the strength to do so. Hearing Jian Yi's words, Xiao Yao nodded. Then, Jian Yi's figure disappeared in an instant. There was no trace of him at all. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air. Spatial martial skill? Spatial martial skill was a very rare and precious martial skill. It was extremely difficult to cultivate, but its power was enormous. It could even be said to be strange. When they were in the Myriad Star domain, no one knew about spatial martial skills. However, in the eastern region, there were some, but they were very few. After Xiao Yao came to the eastern region, she naturally learned about spatial martial arts. She couldn't sense Jian Yi's existence at all. Xiao Yao said indifferently, "Why are you so serious right from the start?" He even used a spatial martial technique. Jian Yi's spatial martial skill had already been cultivated to a high level. Moreover, Jian Yi's fighting style was completely different from Sword Maniac's. Sword Maniac liked to fight head-on. When two enemies met on a narrow path, only the brave would win. He would not retreat at all. Facing any enemy, Sword Maniac believed in the principle of defeating them with one sword strike. However, Jian Yi was different. Jian Yi's sword principle was flexible and ingenious. In Jian Yi's opinion, if there was a smarter way to win, why should he fight head-on with the enemy? It was precisely because of this that those who had fought with Sword One knew that this fellow's sword simply appeared and disappeared unpredictably. Sometimes, you wouldn't even be able to find him before you were defeated. And now, Xiao Yao was facing such a strange and agile Sword One. How could he deal with it? Xiao Yao didn't make any extra movements. It could even be said that he didn't move at all. The arena fell into a strange silence. It was supposed to be a fierce battle, but at this moment, only Xiao Yao stood quietly in the arena. In the void, Jian Yi, who had been waiting for an opportunity, didn't make a move. It wasn't that he didn't have chance. On the contrary, in Jian Yi's eyes, Xiao Yao was full of flaws. It seemed that any of his attacks could severely injure him. However, the more this was the case, the more cautious Jian Yi became, because it was too strange. As time passed, Jian Yi didn't show up. Xiao Yao was not anxious at all. Frankly speaking, such a battle was extremely boring in the eyes of the onlookers, because they couldn't see anything at all. However, just as someone couldn't help complaining, a black shadow suddenly appeared behind Xiao Yao. A sword light flashed. This was a sword strike that was extremely fast. Sword One's sword, other than being agile and strange, had another characteristic, which was its speed. It was ridiculously fast, so fast that no one had time to react. Faced with such a strange and fast sword, it would be difficult for anyone else to block it. However, the strange thing was that the moment Jian Yi appeared, Xiao Yao moved almost at the same time. Both of them attacked almost at the same time. Because of this, Jian Yi's ridiculously fast sword was easily blocked by Xiao Yao. How is this possible? Faced with such a result, even Jian Yi couldn't believe it. How did Xiao Yao predict his attack? Yes, Xiao Yao had made a move in advance. The only possibility was that he knew that Jian Yi would appear here and attack. But how'd he know? It was completely impossible. He was very confident in his spatial martial arts. It was impossible for his aura to be exposed. Unable to figure it out, He flashed and disappeared into the void again. It's so convenient to have spatial martial arts. Seeing this, Xiao Yao said enviously. In the next second, He appeared on the left side of He again. Just like before, he attacked quickly and silently. However, He made a move in advance and easily blocked Yi's attack again. It was as if he could predict the future. No matter which direction Yi attacked from, Xiao Yao could prepare in advance and easily block it. Once or twice might be due to luck, but if it happened every time, it could only be attributed to Xiao Yao's ability. How is this possible? The more Yi fought, the more shocked he became. He had a feeling that everything he did was predicted by Xiao Yao in advance. Could this guy predict the future? Could he see what would happen in the future? Otherwise, how could he easily know where He would appear every time he attacked? Obviously, Xiao Yao's attack speed was not as fast as his, but he could easily block Yi's attack every time by relying on his early reaction. Even Yi, who was in the audience, was shocked. He had never thought that someone could break Yi's spatial martial arts in such a way. Impossible. Yi's spatial martial arts have reached the perfect realm long ago. This is the spatial martial arts in his bloodline. It is unparalleled in the world. Even divine ancestor realm experts can't sense it. How could Xiao Yao do it? Please add it to your collection. Monthly vote. Recommended. Chapter 31-38. The sword fanatic could not believe that there was someone in this world who could so easily and perfectly counter Yi's spatial martial arts. This was absolutely impossible. One had to know that even if it was him, he would not be able to do so perfectly when facing Yi. There was only one way to counter Yi's spatial martial arts, and that was to fight head-on with his strength. Using his own speed or his advantage in reaction, he could react the moment Yi attacked. This was what the sword fanatic had always believed. However, now, Xiao Yao had completely suppressed Yi. From the beginning of the battle until now, he seemed to be led by the nose by Xiao Yao. It was as if Xiao Yao could foresee everything that Yi did. This was terrifying. Moreover, how did Xiao Yao do this? Everyone was puzzled, not to mention the young talents. Even Lin Yin, Qing Lin, and the other kings of Emperor Dong's palace on the high platform were looking at Xiao Yao in confusion. This kid is a little strange. How can he predict Yi's movements? It doesn't look like a divine ability, but he can do it. It's a little strange. Moreover, he has cultivated his spatial martial arts very well. Even so, he is still seen through every time. With the king's eyesight, it was not difficult for them to see that Xiao Yao did not possess any divine ability or any special means. Therefore, they were very curious about how he could predict Yi's movements. As they spoke, everyone looked at Xiao Chun. As his father, Xiao Chun should know his son's ability very well. In response, Xiao Chun smiled and said, Xiao Yao is different from Xiao Yao. If Xiao Lao was born strong, then Xiao Yao fights with his brain. Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao are completely different. Brain? These strange words made everyone even more confused. In the arena, after countless failed attempts, He also knew that his spatial martial arts were useless in front of Xiao Yao. It was one of his killing moves, but Xiao Yao had completely destroyed it from the beginning. He appeared again and looked at Xiao Yao with a serious expression. However, Xiao Yao was still calm and did not change his expression at all. It seems that I have underestimated you, brother Xiao Yao, Jianyi said in a deep voice. Without waiting for Xiao Yao's reply, he moved his feet and immediately rushed toward Xiao Yao. Since his spatial martial arts were useless, he could only fight head-on and use his strength to speak. After the exchange, just now, although his spatial martial skill didn't have the slightest effect, Sword 1 still discovered fact. Xiao Yao's strength was indeed not as good as Xiao Lao's. In that case, he did not need to use these fancy moves. He would defeat him head-on and use his strength to defeat him. Jinyi's idea was right, and it was indeed the best choice at the moment. Since he was stronger than Xiao Yao, it was best to crush him head-on. The long sword in his hand slashed out fiercely. The blade of the sword streaked across the air and rushed toward Xiao Yao. In the face of Jian Yi's attack, Xiao Yao stabbed out with his sword and hit the weakest point of the sword, perfectly neutralizing Jian Yi's attack. However, blocking this attack was not very useful. Jian Yi appeared in front of Xiao Yao. The two immediately engaged in a fierce hand-to-hand battle. In the blink of an eye, they had exchanged hundreds of moves. On the surface, Jian Yi's strength was indeed stronger than Xiao Yao's. His attacks were swift and fierce, but strangely, even though he was clearly stronger than his opponent, after a fierce battle, Sword One did not gain any advantage at all. It was very strange, especially for Jian Yi, who was in the same situation as before. No matter how he attacked, Xiao Yao seemed to be able to predict it in advance and find the perfect way to neutralize it. This was also the reason why Sword One was unable to gain any advantage even though he had the advantage in terms of strength. All his moves were perfectly predicted by Xiao Yao. How could he gain any advantage under such circumstances? Damn it, Jian Yi cursed in his heart. This feeling made Jian Yi very unhappy. It was as if everything he did was part of Xiao Yao's plan. Xiao Yao only needed to use a small amount of strength to block his full-strength attack. There was no need to mention how sullen this feeling was. While Jian Yi was feeling depressed, Xiao Yao said calmly while attacking, "Is it very strange, brother Jian Yi?" "Yes, why?" Hearing this, Jian Yi did not hide it and immediately nodded to admit it. He was indeed very curious. How could Xiao Yao accurately predict his attacks and react in advance every time? She was completely prepared and waiting for him to attack. Under such circumstances, it would be strange if his attacks were effective. Because of calculation. Hearing this, Xiao Yao did not keep him in suspense and answered directly. However, this answer made Jian Yi even more confused. Calculation? What calculation? Calculation of his attacks? How could this be possible? Everything in a battle was unknown. How could it be calculated? Nothing is impossible. Everyone, no matter who they are, has their own body language. And through this body language, you can judge a person's attack pattern or attack trajectory. For example, if you put your left foot forward, then the next attack will definitely come from the upper right. This is unchangeable. Although it is not 100% accurate, it can be at least 80% accurate. This is enough. By responding in advance, no matter how powerful the attack is, it will be easily resolved. Xiao Yao said to herself. At the same time, she still perfectly resolved Jian Yi's every attack. Of course, Xiao Yao would not say that she could predict the future. She was able to predict Jian Yi's attack trajectory because of her terrifying calculation ability. When Jian Yi made the corresponding body movements to launch an attack, Xiao Yao had already calculated how he would attack. It sounded very simple, but it was absolutely difficult to achieve this step. It could even be said that in the entire eastern region, except for Xiao Yao, there was no one else who could do this. After all, in a battle, everything was fleeting, not to mention those subtle body movements. If it were someone else, it would be considered good if they could notice it, let alone calculate it. But Xiao Yao not only had to notice these details, but also had to calculate the final result in an extremely limited moment. This required a very sharp mind and a huge amount of brain power. Hearing Xiao Yao's explanation, Jian Yi was completely dumbfounded. Did she really see through him completely through calculation? Impossible, absolutely impossible. How could there be someone in this world who could do this? Please add it to your collection. Monthly vote, recommended. End of this chapter. Chapter 31-39. Could a person's calculation ability really be so terrifying? Jian Yi said that ever since he started cultivating, he had seen countless experts, but none of them had been able to do what Xiao Yao did. How could he predict the opponent's attack in advance just based on the opponent's subtle movements? How is that possible? However, regardless of whether Jian Yi was willing to believe it or not, this was the truth. This was also why Xiao Yao's combat ability was still so amazing even though he was not as talented as Xiao Lao. Xiao Yao had given Jian Yi a great shock. On the other side of the high platform, Xiao Chun also told the crowd what he had seen. For a moment, even the challenger-level experts were in disbelief. You must be kidding, Brother Xiao Chun. Can a person really do this? Can he predict the future just based on this? Brother Xiao Chun, don't tell me you taught him all this. Even the challenger-level experts admitted that even they could not do what Xiao Yao did. In response, Xiao Chun smiled and shook his head. Of course I didn't teach him, because even I can't do this. Xiao Yao's calculation ability was indeed not taught by Xiao Chun. In other words, it was equivalent to Xiao Yao's special body constitution. It was an ability unique to him. No one else could imitate or learn from him. When Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao were just born, Xiao Chun, Qin Shu, and Fairy of 100 Flowers were secretly worried. This was because Xiao Lao, as the younger brother, was born with an innate sword body. His talent was unparalleled, and this was not difficult to see from his later cultivation. Whether it was cultivation realm, martial arts practice, or comprehension of sword intent, Xiao Lao absolutely crushed Xiao Yao. This came from a suppression of talent. They thought that Xiao Yao, who was far less talented than Xiao Lao, would soon be pulled apart by his younger brother. Even Xiao Chun thought that Xiao Yao's achievements would not be too high. Of course, this was only a relative term. As Xiao Chen's son, no matter how useless he was, his achievements were far from what an ordinary person could compare to. However, Xiao Chun did not think too much about it at that time. So what if his talent was mediocre? He could give him whatever he wanted anyway. Xiao Chen's wish for his family was very simple. He wanted them to be safe and sound. However, just when everyone thought that Xiao Yao would be pulled apart by Xiao Lao, things did not develop in that direction. Even though Xiao Luo had great talent, and his cultivation and power surpassed Xiao Yao's, Xiao Luo might not be able to win against Xiao Yao every time they fought. In other words, Xiao Yao was almost always giving way to Xiao Lao. This was also why Xiao Yao said that if they fought to the death, Xiao Lao would most likely be the one to die. It was only then that Xiao Chun realized that Xiao Yao was different. Then, Xiao Chun personally fought with Xiao Yao. He remembered the first time he found out that Xiao Yao had such an ability. Even as his father, he was greatly shocked. Facing his attacks, Xiao Yao was actually able to accurately predict them without any mistakes. If it wasn't for the huge difference in strength and the fact that his body was unable to think, Xiao Yao could even perfectly defend against his attacks. This was very terrifying. With such an ability, Xiao Yao could be said to be invincible among her peers. That's right. Even a top prodigy like Xiao Lao could not do anything when facing Xiao Yao. This was because all your attacks would be predicted in advance. As such, there was no way to fight at all. After listening to Xiao Chen's introduction, all the kings took a deep breath. Looking at Xiao Yao in the arena, they all smiled bitterly and shook their heads. This kid is really good at hiding. Yeah, compared to his younger brother, this kid is simply too low-key. All this time, most people had been paying attention to Xiao Lao. They only knew that Xiao Chun had a son called Xiao Lao. He was very talented, and his battle strength was also ridiculously strong. However, very few people paid attention to Xiao Yao, who was the elder brother. In their eyes, Xiao Yao was simply too ordinary. Compared to ordinary people, his talent was indeed not bad. However, all the kings were used to seeing all kinds of prodigies. They probably did not care about this little bit of talent. Almost everyone subconsciously ignored Xiao Yao and focused their attention on Xiao Lao. However, who would have thought that Xiao Yao was not inferior to his dazzling younger brother at all? And from a certain perspective, Xiao Yao was even more terrifying. This was because no matter how strong Xiao Lao was, there would always be flaws and ways to deal with him. However, Xiao Yao's terrifying calculation ability was almost unbeatable. As long as you attacked, he would be able to calculate your attack, unless you stood still and did not move. However, that would not solve the problem either. At this moment, on the arena, Xiao Yao, who had been defending all this time, finally began to counterattack. He no longer blindly defended. Instead, he switched from defense to offense. Just as everyone expected, Xiao Yao, who had switched from defense to offense, still made Jian Yi very uncomfortable. When defending, Xiao Yao could make predictions in advance and perfectly block all of his opponent's attacks. When attacking, Xiao Yao was one step ahead of his opponent every time. He specialized in attacking Jian Yi's flaws or weak points in his defense. This made Jian Yi's defense extremely difficult because Xiao Yao could accurately find his weak points every time. As a result, Jian Yi could be said to be exhausted in an instant. The most uncomfortable thing was that even though Jian Yi knew that Xiao Yao had this ability and knew that he could calculate his next move, he had no way to deal with it at all. Have I really been completely seen through? Jian Yi could not help but ask himself after being forced to retreat by Xiao Yao. At this moment, Xiao Yao stabbed out with his sword. It seemed like it was going straight for his face. Jian Yi reacted immediately. He directly swung his sword, trying to block Xiao Yao's attack. However, Xiao Yao seemed to have guessed that Jian Yi would do this. 1 second before Jian Yi attacked, that's right, 1 second before, Xiao Yao withdrew his attack and dodged to the side. Seeing Xiao Yao's movement, Jian Yi knew that his attack had missed again. However, he could not withdraw his attack now. He could only watch as Xiao Yao perfectly dodged his attack. However, this was not the end. After his attack missed, Xiao Yao took the opportunity to come to Jian Yi's side. Without giving Jian Yi any time to react, Xiao Yao's long sword was already placed horizontally on Jian Yi's neck. Just a little bit more, and the long sword would be able to cut open Jian Yi's throat. Feeling a cold breath, Jian Yi exhaled and said helplessly, "I lost." Hearing this, Xiao Yao sheathed his sword and showed a gentle smile on his face. "Thank you for letting me win, Jian. Please add me to your collection. Monthly votes recommend me." Chapter 3140. A seemingly strange battle had finally come to an end. This battle wasn't as thrilling as Xiao Lao's and the Sword Maniacs, nor was it as shocking. But it still shocked everyone present, not for anything else, but because of Xiao Yao's terrifying ability. After this battle, no one would dare to underestimate Xiao Yao anymore. His ability to predict the future, which was almost comparable to his ability to predict the future, was already something that no one could ignore. Think about it. If they were to fight against Xiao Yao, would they be able to find a way to counter his terrifying ability? Everyone thought about this question in their hearts, but the answer they got was surprisingly consistent. There was no way to counter it. That's right, there was no way to counter it, unless you had enough strength to crush Xiao Yao, so that his body couldn't keep up with the calculations in his mind. But among the younger generation, who had such strength? Probably no one. There were people who were stronger than Xiao Yao, and there was more than one. The strength of those people was limited, far from being able to completely crush Xiao Yao. In this way, Xiao Yao could make up for the gap in combat strength with his terrifying ability to calculate, and even gain an advantage. There was no good way to counter it. As Xiao Yao sheathed his sword, Jian Yi smiled bitterly. "I still lost." After the battle, the two walked down the arena together, looking very close. And Jian Yi didn't show too much disappointment because of his defeat. The following battles were still going on, and now the top 10 could basically be determined. But the final ranking depended on the accumulated points. For example, Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, Lin Feng, Jian Yi, and the Sword Maniac were all in the top 10. As for Lin Shui, Dongfang Lin, and Xiao Wan, their strength was slightly weaker, but they were enough to be in the top 20. Such a result was already outstanding enough. At least, Xiao Chun, who had been watching the battle from the sidelines, was very satisfied with such a result. The following battles became more and more intense. Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, and the others were still performing well. However, Xiao Yao didn't seem to have a strong desire to win. Unlike Xiao Lao, he was ranked behind Xiao Lao. However, after witnessing Xiao Yao's incredible abilities, the kings of Emperor Dong's palace had a much higher opinion of Xiao Yao. This kid, it seems like he hasn't used his full strength yet. That's right. He clearly had the chance to win several battles, but he directly admitted defeat. This personality is to my liking. It's not like it's a life and death battle. Compared to Xiao Lao's aggressive personality, Xiao Yao's personality was very calm. Anyway, before coming here, Xiao Yao had already set her goal. She just wanted to be in the top 10. As for the number 1, Xiao Yao was not interested. So what if he was number 1 on the Hidden Dragon ranking? Moreover, Xiao Lao also wanted to be number 1. Xiao Yao naturally wouldn't compete with her younger brother. The situation became clearer and clearer. Time also passed by slowly. Finally, after several days of intense battles, the new Hidden Dragon ranking finally came to an end. Xiao Lao successfully became number 1 on the Hidden Dragon ranking. The second place was a young man named Lei Yin. He cultivated lightning-based martial arts and had the heavenly thunder body. He was very strong and defeated Sword Fanatic and Jian. The third place was Sword Fanatic. As for Xiao Yao and Jian, one was number 8 and the other was number 9. It seemed that Xiao Yao's ranking wasn't low. However, anyone who had seen the Hidden Dragon ranking knew that Xiao Yao's ranking was definitely higher than that. If Xiao Yao had been more serious in the battles, she could have at least squeezed into the top 3. Among other things, Xiao Yao had taken the initiative to admit defeat in the battle with Lei Yin. If that hadn't happened, the outcome would have been uncertain. After all, Xiao Yao's terrifying calculation ability couldn't be countered by Lei Yin. He could only passively endure it. Unfortunately, Xiao Yao was too indifferent. She didn't think too much about the ranking. Therefore, she was ranked number 8. As the final ranking of the Hidden Dragon ranking was released, Qing Lin waved his hand and names appeared on the huge stone tablet. The first one was Xiao Lao. This ranking was the new Hidden Dragon ranking. In the next 100 years, the names on the stone tablet would not change. It would only change when the next Hidden Dragon ranking began. Not only was there a Hidden Dragon stele in the Hidden Dragon realm, but there was also a Hidden Dragon stele in almost every major city in the eastern region. However, it wasn't as big as the main tablet in the Hidden Dragon realm. So many Hidden Dragon tablets were connected. Therefore, when a new ranking of the Hidden Dragon ranking appeared on the main tablet, the same scene occurred in every realm in the eastern region. In every major city, countless people gathered under the Hidden Dragon ranking. They knew that the Hidden Dragon ranking was going to be released this time. Therefore, many people were waiting for the final result. At this moment, following the movement on the Hidden Dragon tablet, everyone shouted excitedly, "It's coming, it's coming." The new ranking of the Hidden Dragon ranking. First place, Xiao Lao. Second place, Lei Yin. Third place, Sword Maniac. 8th place, Xiao Yao. 9th place, Jin. Looking at the ranking on the Hidden Dragon ranking, everyone was extremely excited. After all, this was the golden age of the Eastern region. The 100 people on the ranking represented the ceiling of the younger generation in the Eastern region. They were the strongest group of the younger generation. The others couldn't be compared with them. However, some people were still a little confused when looking at the ranking on the Hidden Dragon ranking, because the geniuses that they were familiar with were not ranked first. Lei Yin and Sword Maniac, who had already made a name for themselves in the Eastern region, were only ranked 2nd and 3rd on the Hidden Dragon ranking this time. Before the ranking started, both Lei Yin and Sword Maniac were strong competitors for the first place. Some people even dared to say that the first place of this year's Hidden Dragon ranking would definitely be decided among these few geniuses. Compared to the others, Sword Maniac and Lei Yin did indeed have overwhelming strength. There was a clear gap between them and the other geniuses. However, after a few times, the first place still didn't belong to any of them. This made many people feel a little strange. On top of that, the name Xiao Luo was extremely unfamiliar to the crowd. Many people didn't even know who he was. A nameless person who came out of nowhere was able to suppress Lei Yin, Sword Maniac, and the other geniuses. People couldn't help but be curious about the first place of the Hidden Dragon ranking. In addition, there were only a few people who could personally come to the Hidden Dragon realm and watch the Hidden Dragon ranking competition. Most people didn't even have the chance to watch it. Therefore, there were naturally many speculations about the whole process of the Hidden Dragon ranking. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 3141. A person who appeared out of nowhere. He didn't have any fame before, but he took first place on the hidden dragon list. This made many people very curious about Xiao Lao's identity. Who is this person called Xiao Luo? He actually beat Lei Yin and the sword maniac to take first place. Yeah, I've never heard of such a person in the Eastern region. Generally, young geniuses who could participate in the hidden dragon list couldn't be unknown in the Eastern region. Even if they rarely went out to experience the world, they would at least be heard of. But Xiao Lao was different. Not only had the world never seen him, but they had never even heard of his name. It was this kind of nameless person who had shocked the world with a single brilliant feat this time, valiantly seizing first place on the hidden dragon rankings. For a time, the entire Eastern region was guessing Xiao Lao's identity, guessing which big family or force he was from. After all, the identity of first place on the hidden dragon list was enough to attract people. Unfortunately, no matter how the world guessed, Xiao Lao's identity was still a mystery. No one knew where he came from. The more they couldn't find an answer, the more curious the world was. But they didn't have to wait too long. Only 5 days after the hidden dragon list, a big force in the Eastern region, the Tianji Pavilion, published a book called Hidden Dragon. The Tianji Pavilion was a big force in the entire Eastern region, but it was a little special. It never participated in any fights, but it was well informed and seemed to know every warrior in the Eastern region like the back of its hand. Therefore, the Tianji Pavilion was more like an intelligence agency in the Eastern region. Any information published by the Tianji Pavilion was very credible in the Eastern region. The world almost didn't have any doubts. As for the Book of Hidden Dragon, it was a piece of information that the Divination Pavilion would announce after every Hidden Dragon ranking battle. Because only a few people were qualified to enter the Hidden Dragon realm to see the Hidden Dragon list with their own eyes. Therefore, in order to satisfy the world's curiosity, the Tianji Pavilion published the Book of Hidden Dragon to introduce the process of each Hidden Dragon list battle, and some detailed information about each Hidden Dragon list battle, so that the world could know more about these geniuses on the Hidden Dragon list. Compared to the past, this year's Hidden Dragon ranking was clearly more attractive. The reason was because of Xiao Lao, who was at the top. This mysterious kid that no one knew anything about. Therefore, after the Heaven's Secret Pavilion's Hidden Dragon was released, it instantly became popular in the entire Eastern region. Almost every martial artist rushed to buy it. On the first page of the Book of Hidden Dragon, Xiao Lao was introduced. It was very detailed. Basically, all of Xiao Lao's information was made public. Of course, this was just basic information. After all, Xiao Lao's identity was special. He was the son of the king of Emperor Dong's palace, Xiao Chun. Naturally, the Heavenly Secret Pavilion did not dare to offend the Emperor Dong's palace. The Pavilion Lord had even asked for Xiao Qin's opinion when publishing Hidden Dragon. After getting Xiao Qin's approval, they finally dared to release Xiao Lao's basic information. Xiao Qin didn't care too much about this. It was just some basic information. Moreover, they weren't worried that others would have any ideas about Xiao Lao and the others. What a joke! With the Xiao family's current strength, who would dare to covet them? If he had the strength, there was no need for him to hide it. After all, he was not a thief. Damn, Xiao Lao is the son of the king of Emperor Dong's palace. No wonder he has such strength. So that's why, according to the introduction of Xiao Lao, the world finally knew his identity. He was from the Xiao family, the king of Emperor Dong's palace. It was no exaggeration to say that Xiao Lao's background was much higher than Sword Maniac and the others. After all, with a king as his father, he could do whatever he wanted in the Eastern region. Even the powerful Jin family did not dare to disrespect the king of Emperor Dong's palace. One should know that the Jin family did not have any combat ancestor realm experts. The strongest expert in the Jin family was only a divine ancestor realm expert. They were far from being comparable to the king of Emperor Dong's palace. For a time, the news about Xiao Lao's background caused a sensation in the Eastern region. Even Xiao Chun and Xiao Yao became famous. There was a lot of discussion in the outside world, but Xiao Chun and the others did not care at all. After returning to Emperor Dong's palace, Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, Sword Maniac, and Jian Yi sat in the courtyard. Jian Yi looked at Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao with a smile. Brother Xiao Yao, Brother Xiao Lao, Brother Xiao Yao. You guys really shocked the world this time. The whole eastern region is talking about you guys. I don't care. It's all thanks to Xiao Lao. Come on, don't you think I don't know? Brother, you didn't try your best at all. They knew that they were famous in the outside world, but they obviously did not care about such a reputation. It was good to have a reputation, but there were no substantial benefits, so the four of them did not care about it. Let the outside world say whatever they wanted. As for why Jian, Yi, and Sword Maniac were in the Xiao family, it was because they came back with Xiao Chun after the Hidden Dragon list. Under the influence of Sword Maniac, Jian, Yi also wanted to be Xiao Chen's disciple. Naturally, the Jian family did not have the slightest objection. On the contrary, they were very supportive. Xiao Chun was the king of Emperor Dong's palace. If the two of them could be Xiao Chen's disciples, it would definitely be a great thing for the Jian family. It could be said that there were only benefits and no disadvantages. Not to mention other things, after the two of them became Xiao Chen's disciples, the Jian family would be connected to an expert of Emperor Dong's palace. Moreover, this connection was not through benefits, but through the relationship between master and disciple. There was no doubt that this connection was stronger than benefits. Once the Jian family was in trouble, even if it was for Sword Maniac and Jian, Xiao Chen would not stand by and do nothing. Moreover, the Jian family had specially investigated Xiao Chun. Although the Jian family did not have any combat ancestor realm kings in Emperor Dong's palace, they still had divine ancestor realm members. The information sent back by these people undoubtedly showed Xiao Chen's value. First of all, Xiao Chen's strength was definitely one of the best, even among the kings in Emperor Dong's palace. Secondly, Xiao Chen's talent. Compared to the other kings, Xiao Chun was simply too young. It was very likely that Xiao Chun would be able to make further progress if he had already reached the combat ancestor realm at such a young age. At that time, Xiao Chun would be at the same level as Emperor Dong. Thinking about it, if such an existence stood behind the Jian family, wouldn't it mean that the Jian family had another guardian? Xiao Chen's only weakness was his seniority. After all, he had only joined Emperor Dong's palace for a short time. However, this was not too important. Secondly, it was said that Emperor Dong valued Xiao Chun very much. This was enough to perfectly make up for his lack of seniority. Therefore, the Jian family thought highly of Xiao Chun. It could even be said that they were thinking of betting on Xiao Chun. Please add, vote, recommend. Chapter 3142. That's right. The kings of Emperor Dong's palace usually had many vassal forces. Dong Wang had no intention of stopping them. After all, it was not a bad thing. Even if he wanted to stop them, it would be troublesome. So he might as well let nature take its course. The Jian family's intention was very obvious. They were willing to be Xiao Chen's vassal. After all, there was no reason to refuse such a powerful expert with unlimited potential. Moreover, Xiao Chen had just joined Emperor Dong's palace and did not have any vassal forces around him. If the Jian family could become Xiao Chen's vassal at this time, they would definitely benefit a lot. Unfortunately, the Jian family had no idea what Xiao Chen was trying to do, because Xiao Chen did not make it clear that he wanted to take Jian, Yi, and the Sword Maniac as his disciples. Even if these two little guys followed him to Emperor Dong's palace, they had not seen Xiao Chen for so many days. After chatting for a while, the topic gradually turned to Xiao Chen. The Sword Maniac was very direct and asked in front of Xiao Yao and the others, "Xiao Yao, is Senior Xiao Chen willing to take us as his disciples?" This guy asked directly. The Sword Maniac was speechless. Even if you want to ask, you should be more tactful. However, Xiao Yao knew the Sword Maniac's character, so he did not mind and said with a smile, "Father didn't tell me, but don't worry. Since he agreed to let you come to Emperor Dong's palace, there should be no problem." Since he brought these two to Emperor Dong's palace, it meant that Xiao Chen wanted to take them as his disciples. However, he did not know why he did not do so. As for what Xiao Chen wanted to say, Xiao Yao could not guess. Moreover, this was not something he should be concerned about. Of course, Xiao Yao could put in a good word for the Sword Maniac and Jianyi brothers, but he did not do so. Whether or not he was willing to accept the two of them was his father's decision, and it was up to his father to decide. On the other side, Xiao Chun and Qin Shiru were sitting together and talking about Jian Yi and the sword fanatic. Flower Fairy asked with a smile as she peeled a spirit fruit for Xiao Chun. "What are you thinking? I think those two brats really look forward to you. Do you really not plan to take them in? You've already guessed it. Why are you still asking me?" Xiao Chun smiled. Flower Fairy knew the reason why he didn't accept Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao. She was smart enough to have guessed it. Hearing this, Bai Hua Fairy smiled and did not refute. The time wasn't right yet. It wasn't the right time to accept those two little things. It's time for all of you to break through. The cultivation level of a world lord is indeed a little too low. Xiao Chun was already a war ancestor, while 100 Flower Fairy and the others were only world lords. However, it was not easy to break through to the ancient era's level. At the very least, the amount of resources needed was huge. Although Emperor Dawn's palace had these resources, Xiao Chun needed enough resources for at least 10 people to break through to the ancient era's level. Qin Shiru, 100 Flower Fairy, his parents, Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, and Xiao Wan. Even Xiao Chun could not take such a huge amount of resources directly from Emperor Dawn's palace. Therefore, Xiao Chun thought of the Jian family. As one of the top forces in the eastern region, the Jian family might not have precious resources. For example, they did not have the resources for war ancestor realm experts to cultivate. However, they definitely had the resources to break through to the ancient era's level, and it should be quite a lot. At least enough for 10 people to break through. Therefore, Xiao Chun wanted to get these resources from the Jian family. Xiao Chun was thinking for the sake of his family. Moreover, he believed that the Jian family would be here soon. As expected, the family head of the Jian family came to Emperor Dawn's palace in person and looked for Xiao Chun directly. After reporting, Xiao Chun and the family head of the Jian family sat opposite each other in the main hall. Facing Xiao Chun, the family head of the Jian family was very humble and said respectfully, "Sir Xiao Chun, please forgive me for disturbing you. It's okay. The two boys from the Jian family are with me. Well, speaking of which, I'm sorry to have troubled you. Did the two boys cause any trouble?" "They're good. There's no trouble at all." Hearing this, the family head of the Jian family heaved a sigh of relief. Since Xiao Chun said so, it meant that there was hope. Naturally, it was impossible to be secretive when chatting with someone like Xiao Chun. Moreover, Xiao Chun must have already guessed the purpose of his visit. Instead of being secretive, it was better to be direct. Therefore, after exchanging a few pleasantries, the family head of the Jian family went straight to the point. "To be honest, I'm here to disturb you because of the two boys. The two boys from my family have been obsessed with swordsmanship since young, and they admire you greatly. Now that they have the opportunity to meet you, if you think they're not bad, I hope you can accept them. It's good to let them follow you and do some chores." Hearing the family head of the Jian family's words, Xiao Chun was not surprised at all. He already knew it. Nodding slightly, Xiao Chun said straightforwardly, "Actually, I have long wanted to accept the two of them as my disciples. They have good talent and are good seedlings. However, before that, I need something. Sir, please tell us. The Jian family will do our best. Actually, it's not that important. I need enough cultivation resources for 10 people to break through to the ancient deity realm." Jian Wushuang stated his request directly. The cultivation resources for 10 people to break through to the ancient deity realm were very generous. With the Jian family strength, they would probably feel heartache if they wanted to take out so many resources. However, what Xiao Chun did not expect was that the family head of the Jian family nodded without hesitation. "Actually, the Jian family already has these things. Since you need them, I'll order someone to send them over." The family head of the Jian family did not hesitate at all when it was something that could make the Jian family's heart ache. When he said that, even Xiao Chun could not help but look at the family head of the Jian family in a new light. The family head of the Jian family was quite bold. It seemed that the Jian family was really planning to bet everything on Jian Wushuang. Even the greeting gift was so generous. With the Jian family head's agreement, Xiao Chun and the Jian family were in the same boat. The Jian family could provide Xiao Chun with what he needed. They could even help Xiao Chun deal with a lot of troubles or chores. However, correspondingly, if the Jian family encountered trouble, Xiao Chun would have to lend a hand. This was a mutual contribution. Xiao Chun contributed strength, while the Jian family contributed resources. In that case, many thanks. Jian Wushuang smiled and said to the family head of the Jian family. He then ordered someone to call Sword Maniac and Jian Yi. He planned to officially accept them as his disciples. Regarding this, the family head of the Jian family was naturally very satisfied. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 3143. Jian Yi and Sword Maniac soon arrived at the main hall. Seeing them, Xiao Chun didn't hide anything and said bluntly, "I want to take you two as my disciples. I plan to accept the two of you as my disciples. Are you willing to become my disciples?" Hearing this, Jian Yi and Sword Maniac naturally wouldn't refuse. They immediately knelt down and shouted respectfully, "Greetings, Master." It wasn't troublesome for Xiao Chun to take disciples. Moreover, Xiao Chun himself didn't like those cumbersome procedures. In Xiao Chun's opinion, it was better to do something practical than to pay attention to those cumbersome procedures. With a few simple words, Jian Yi and Sword Maniac became Xiao Chun's disciples. The master of the Jian family, who witnessed the whole process, also nodded with a smile. It was a great opportunity for Jian Yi and Sword Maniac to be Xiao Chun's disciples. He believed that under the guidance of Xiao Chun, their strength would definitely improve qualitatively. The master of the Jian family stayed for a meal. After eating to his heart's content, the master of the Jian family took his leave. "Master Xiao Chun, the Jian family will definitely send those things to you as soon as possible. Well, thank you for your trouble." After bidding farewell to the master of the Jian family, Xiao Chun's days returned to normal. In fact, as the king of Emperor Dong's palace, he wouldn't be too busy unless something big happened in the eastern region. Under normal circumstances, those trivial matters would be handled by the subordinates. Basically, it was the king's turn to do it personally. When it really came to the point where the king had to deal with it personally, it was definitely not a trivial matter. Just like the evil warrior from before. Without any tasks, Xiao Chun began to cultivate while teaching Jian Yi and Sword Maniac. After becoming Xiao Chun's disciples, the two naturally stayed in the Xiao family. Xiao Chun usually lived with Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao, so naturally, they cultivated together. Xiao Chun did not hide anything from these two little fellows, which was very good. Basically, whatever Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao could enjoy, the two of them could too. Xiao Chun would not favor one over the other. The two of them naturally felt this as well, and they acknowledged Xiao Chun even more in their hearts. If it was said that the two little fellows only wanted to become Xiao Chun's disciple because they admired him before, then now, they really regarded him as their master. Days passed, but such peaceful days didn't last for long. On this day, Zixin found Xiao Chun. "The old man is looking for us. Let's go together." Since Dong Wang suddenly summoned him, Xiao Chun naturally would not refuse. He nodded and went to the old man's residence with Zixin. It was still the same as before. However, when Xiao Chun and Yishuan arrived, they discovered that the old man had not only summoned the two of them. The other kings had also arrived. For everyone to be gathered together all of a sudden, what kind of major event had happened? However, the East region had been very peaceful recently. Nothing had happened. After everyone arrived, the old man walked out of the room. His face was calm, and nothing could be seen at all. "Old man, why did you call all of us here? Is there something wrong?" Qing Lin asked nonchalantly while sipping his tea, as though he was at home. The others were the same. In front of Dong Wang, they were not restrained at all. Dong Wang had long been used to this. He came to the main seat and sat down. He glanced at everyone present, and then slowly said, "There is something wrong. Yes, there is. Something happened in the northern region, and they asked me for help. This old man wants to go there personally. Who is willing to come with me?" North region? Hearing this, everyone's expression changed slightly. There were a total of 5 regions in the Fire Phoenix Galaxy: East, South, West, North, and Center. The Center region was the center of the Fire Phoenix Galaxy, and it was directly managed by the Star-Lord. The East, South, West, and North region were managed by the Emperor Thought. Under normal circumstances, the various regions would not interfere with each other. However, this time, the North region actually asked the East region for help. Moreover, even the old man wanted to go there personally. It was obvious that something had happened in the North region. Moreover, the matter was so serious that the North region could not handle it with their own strength. What exactly was the matter that the strength of one region could not handle and had to ask for help from the other regions? Old man, what's wrong with the North region? They can't handle it themselves, but they still have to ask for help from us? Laiwan asked curiously. This was also the question that everyone was concerned about. Dong Wang did not hide the matter and said slowly, "You all know about the ancient beast seal in the North region, right?" Hearing this, everyone nodded. Only Xiao Chun and Lin Yin did not know about it. There was a huge difference between the North region and the East region, or rather, the North region had a unique characteristic. There was a huge seal in the North region. It was a seal that was personally set up by the previous generations of Star-Lord. There was a type of mutated beast in the seal called an ancient beast. These mutated beasts were not creatures from the Fire Phoenix Galaxy, and no one knew where they came from. These exotic beasts were all extremely powerful, and there was no way to kill them at all. Even if their souls were wiped out, these exotic beasts would revive after a short period of time. It was precisely because they could not be killed that they could only be sealed. Every once in a while, the Star-Lord would strengthen the seal. However, for some reason, these mutated beasts actually broke through the seal this time. Without the obstruction of the seal, the powerful mutated beasts could be said to be wreaking havoc in the North region. Although the rulers of the North region led people to stop them at the first moment, there was a huge gap in strength. Among the mutated beasts that escaped from the seal, 2 of them were comparable to rulers, and at least 10 of them were comparable to kings. There were even more mutated beasts of various levels below. It was precisely because of this that the North region had no choice but to ask for help from the East region. In fact, it should have been the Star-Lord who made a move, but he had been in closed-door cultivation recently, so there was no other way. After telling everyone the truth, Qing Lin shook his head helplessly after listening to old Dong Huang's words. The North region is really unlucky. That ancient bee seal is simply a ticking time bomb. No one knows when it will explode. Yes, compared to the other regions, the North region is indeed unlucky. Those ancient beasts can't be killed and can only be sealed. All right, cut the crap. The situation in the North region is not good. You guys discuss who will go with me to the North region and who will stay behind. Hearing everyone's conversation, old Dong Wang interrupted them. The situation in the North region was not good, and they could not delay any longer. Otherwise, the North region's losses would only increase. Those ancient beasts could not be allowed to continue acting so unscrupulously. Therefore, they needed to set off as soon as possible and seal them again to minimize the losses as much as possible. Please collect monthly vote recommend. Chapter 3144. This time, Dong Wang planned to lead 5 challenger-level cultivators to the North region. Of course, the warriors at all levels would also go with them. After some discussion, Xiao Chun, Lin Yin, Lai Wan, and 2 other challenger-level cultivators would go with the old man. Xiao Chun and Lin Yin had just joined the Emperor Dong's palace, so their knowledge of the Fire Phoenix Galaxy was naturally not as good as the others. This trip to the northern region was a rare opportunity for the 2 of them. Hence, Dong Wang directly requested for the 2 of them to make the trip. Xiao Chun and Lin Yin did not refuse. After confirming the candidates, Dong Huang waved his hand and said, "There's no time to lose. Let's set off in 2 hours and get ready as soon as possible." It seemed that the situation was indeed a little urgent, so the old man did not delay and only gave them 2 hours to get ready. This was mainly because the subordinates did not make proper arrangements. Otherwise, they would have set off immediately. Xiao Chun and Lin Yun did not intend to pay attention to trivial matters. When they returned home, they told Qin Shu and the other girls about it. Knowing that Xiao Chun was going to the North region, the girls were a little helpless, but they did not stop him. They only reminded Xiao Chun to pay attention to his safety. However, Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, sword fanatic, and Jian Yi all went to Xiao Chun and expressed their desire to go with him. Father, are you going to the North region? Where is it? Can we go and buy one? We've never been there before. Master, I also want to go and have a look. We've basically finished our training in the East region, but we've never been to the North region. Yes, I wonder how strong those geniuses in the North region are. It was especially so for Xiao Luo and the sword maniac. The two of them strongly requested to go with Xiao Chun. Originally, Xiao Chun directly refused, but who would have thought that Qin Shu and the other girls, who did not have any thoughts at first, actually spoke up one after another this time. I see. Speaking of which, we have never left the Eastern region before. Why don't we go together? Sure. I'm bored to death staying at home all day. That's right. Husband, bring us along too. Not only the little ones, even Qin Shu, Fairy of 100 Flowers, and the other girls were here. With the girls backing them up, the little fellows naturally had more confidence. They looked like they wouldn't give up if they didn't go. What are you doing? I'm not going there for fun. We know, but you can't always make us stay at home. Besides, although we are not strong, we can protect ourselves if we are careful. The reason why the girls wanted to go with Xiao Qin this time was that they had never left the Eastern region. But more importantly, even if they didn't understand, they knew that the Eastern and Northern regions were definitely very far apart. Moreover, after Xiao Chun went to the Northern region, he still had to deal with the ancient beasts. They probably wouldn't see Xiao Chun for a long time. Because of this, the girls wanted to go with Xiao Chun. Anyway, they wouldn't participate in the battle and wouldn't cause trouble for Xiao Chun. The girls' real purpose was to accompany Xiao Chun. Under the coaxing and pestering of the girls, Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao, Xiao Chun finally agreed helplessly. There wasn't much time to prepare. In fact, there wasn't much to prepare. He just said goodbye to Xiao Qing and Bai Ruyue, and everyone left together. Fortunately, Xiao Qing and Bai Ruyue didn't join in the fun. Otherwise, Xiao Chun would really have a big headache. Along the way to the main hall, he happened to run into Lin Yun. Lu Bingning, Qing Zhu, Lin Feng, and Lin Shui were also following behind Lin Yun. Without asking, Xiao Chun guessed what was going on. It was very likely that Lin Yun had also encountered the same thing as him. The two of them smiled at each other and saw a touch of helplessness in each other's eyes. Soon, everyone arrived. No one said anything about the fact that Xiao Chun and Lin Yun's family members were going with them. After all, it was not strange at all. Even old man Dong Wang gave Xiao Chun and Lin Yun a knowing look when he saw this scene. Obviously, this old man was also a kindred spirit. The truth was indeed so. When old man Dong Wang was young, his wife also wanted to be by his side every day. It was only now that Dong Wang was an emperor that he was slightly relieved. Let's go. Dong Wang glanced at everyone and said slowly. Then, everyone boarded the Star Island together. In an instant, the Star Island turned into a stream of light and quickly disappeared into the sky, directly entering the space tunnel. Because the journey was long and time was short, the Star Island speed was naturally at its fastest. Coupled with the teleportation of the space tunnel, its speed had reached an unimaginable level. Even so, it still took 3 days to travel from the East region to the North region. This was actually very fast because it would take at least half a month for a warrior of the War Ancestor realm to fly from the East region to the North region. On the Star Island, everyone naturally had their own temporary residence, not to mention a king like Xiao Chun. Although it couldn't be compared to the residence in Emperor Dong's palace, it was at least a standalone residence, and there was no problem for a family to live in. They still needed 3 days. Xiao Chen's family sat in the courtyard. It was mainly Xiao Chun who was warning his children, especially Xiao Lao and the sword maniac. These two little guys were Xiao Chen's biggest headache. Compared to Xiao Yao and Jian Yi, these two were definitely the brainless type. They only knew how to be brave and didn't care about anything else. Moreover, from the beginning, Xiao Chun could tell that these two were very interested in the mysterious ancient beasts and the young geniuses of the North region. The interest here was actually the desire to battle. Whenever this topic was brought up, the desire to battle could no longer be concealed in their eyes. Xiao Chun didn't care about the young geniuses of the North region. There was no problem at all for them to learn from each other. Moreover, with him around, he didn't have to worry about beating up the younger ones and causing trouble for the older ones. This was the advantage of having a background. However, the ancient beasts were different. They didn't care about your identity. Ancient beasts couldn't be killed, but you could die. If these two little guys were careless, they might put themselves in danger. Because of this, Xiao Chun had to remind them again and again that they had to listen to him when they reached the North region. Do you understand what I'm saying? Don't act on your own when you reach the North region. Otherwise, don't even think about leaving Emperor Dong's palace in the future. Yes, Father. Are we that kind of people? Don't worry. When we reach the North region, I'll definitely listen to you. If you ask me to go east, I'll definitely not go west. I'm most worried about you. This time, you'd better be honest. Please add me to your collection. Monthly vote. Recommend me. End of chapter. Chapter 31:45. Xiao Lao promised solemnly. However, Xiao Chun did not believe a single word of what he had just said. Nobody knew his son better than his father. As his father, how could Xiao Chun not know what kind of person this kid was? Although he agreed readily now, when the time came, this kid would definitely act recklessly. Therefore, he did not believe Xiao Lao at all. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Chun turned to look at Qin Shu and the other women. This time, keep an eye on this kid. Don't let him act recklessly. Yes, husband. Hearing this, Qin Shu and the other women nodded obediently. The women knew the importance of this matter. Moreover, Xiao Chun had already told them about the ancient beasts. Those things were not living creatures. They were bloodthirsty and extremely dangerous. It was impossible for the women not to know when to joke and when to be serious. Seeing that the women nodded without hesitation, Xiao Chun was slightly relieved. Since the whole family had come to the North region this time, Xiao Chun also decided that after the matter of the ancient beast was settled, they could stay in the North region for a while and enjoy the scenery of the North region. Moreover, the old man Dong Wang also said that after the ancient beasts were dealt with, they would not leave immediately. Because the seal had been broken, the Star Lord had to personally seal the ancient beasts after the matter was over. Even with the strength of the two emperors, the East Emperor and the North Emperor, they could not seal those ancient beasts for a long time. Hurrying through the space tunnel was an extremely boring thing. Moreover, the space tunnel did not directly connect the East region and the North region. At the junction of the two regions, there was a space fault. It was impossible to build a space tunnel here. However, the space fault here had already been opened up, so there was nothing to worry about. Fortunately, Xiao Chun and the rest were already used to this kind of hurrying. Moreover, 3 days would pass by casually cultivating. It was not a big deal. Along the way, they entered the North region peacefully. Without stopping at all, they headed straight for the battlefield. In order to prevent these ancient beasts from causing more damage to the North region, the North King had constructed a battlefield from the very beginning of the battle. To put it bluntly, it was a large formation that was used to forcibly limit the scope of the battlefield and prevent the aftermath of the battle from completely affecting the entire northern region. It was worth mentioning that other than being a ruler, the North King was also a formation master. Moreover, he was the strongest formation master in the entire Fire Phoenix galaxy. In terms of formations alone, even the Star Lord was far inferior to the North Emperor. Not only the current North Emperor, but all the previous North Emperors were famous matrix masters. This was a tradition in the North region. Moreover, the North region had the most complete matrix inheritance. This was also the reason why the ancient beasts were sealed in the northern region. If it wasn't for the fact that his cultivation wasn't high enough, the North Emperor would have been able to seal the ancient beasts himself. Unfortunately, the ancient beasts were too powerful. Even if they had a powerful formation, they would still need to borrow the power of the Star Lord. After entering the northern region, it did not take long for them to find the location of the battlefield. The Star Island stopped at a location tens of thousands of miles away from the battlefield. This was also to prevent the Star Island from being destroyed by the aftermath of the battle. Remember, keep an eye on these guys. Before leading them away, Xiao Chun reminded Qin Shiru and the other girls again. In response, the girls nodded repeatedly. Only then did Xiao Chun leave with peace of mind. Lin Yin did the same as Xiao Chun. Similarly, she did not let Lu Bingning and the other girls participate in the battle. Everyone flew out of the Star Island one after another. Although the battlefield was still tens of thousands of miles away, this distance was nothing to combat progenitor realm elites. They could cross it in one step. Let's not waste any more time. Everyone, let's do it. The elites in the Emperor Dong's palace were all people who had experienced hundreds of battles. Hence, the old man Dong Wang did not waste any time talking nonsense, let alone talk nonsense to boost their morale. He spoke bluntly and took the lead to rush to the battlefield. Seeing this, Xiao Chun, Lin Yin, Lai Wan, and the other two kings followed closely behind. In the blink of an eye, everyone rushed into the battlefield. They already knew that the reinforcements from the Emperor Dong's palace had arrived. Hence, the elites of the North region had long opened an entrance in the array to allow Xiao Chun and the others to enter the battlefield smoothly. As they approached the ancient beasts, Xiao Chun felt a terrifying aura rushing towards him. This aura was not exactly a feeling. It was not spiritual power, nor was it a death aura. Instead, it was a power that he had never seen before. It was a power that did not belong to this world. The origin of the ancient beasts has always been a mystery. Until now, there's been no answer. However, Brother Xiao Chun, Brother Lin Yin, when you fight with the ancient beasts, you must not hold back. Try your best to kill them and leave their cores behind. Only then can you successfully seal them. As the battle was about to begin, Lai Wan told Xiao Chun and Lin Yun what they needed to pay attention to. In response, the two of them nodded in agreement. Soon, Xiao Chun finally saw the true appearance of the ancient beasts. They were completely black, but their bodies were incomparably huge. Each ancient beast was tens of thousands of meters tall. In front of these ancient beasts, Xiao Chun and the others were no different from gravel. They were definitely not creatures from this world. It was Xiao Chun's first time seeing such strange creatures. He was not even sure if these ancient beasts were considered living creatures. However, now is not the time to talk about this because old Dong Wang was already fighting against the ancient beasts. At this moment, he was fighting against an ancient beast that was comparable to a ruler. Not far from old Dong Wang, a beautiful woman was also fighting fiercely against an ancient beast that was also a ruler. This should be the North Emperor. He did not expect the ruler of the North region to be a woman, and such a beautiful one at that. Previously, before the Emperor Dong's palace's reinforcements arrived, the North Emperor had been fighting against two rulers by himself. To be honest, the pressure was really great. It was not easy for her to hold on until now, and she was also seriously injured. Now, with the arrival of the Emperor Dong's palace's reinforcements and the old man sharing the pressure for her, the North Emperor's pressure was greatly reduced. A battle between rulers was not something that Xiao Chun and the others could participate in. This was also Xiao Chun's first time seeing the Emperor Dong in action. He was much stronger than a warlord ancestor powerhouse. However, it was obviously not the time to watch the battle. He immediately confirmed his target. A ruler of the North region was fighting fiercely against two warlord ancestor-level ancient beasts. Without any hesitation, Xiao Chun rushed forward in a flash. He blocked the attack of one of the ancient beasts for the ruler of the North region, and then directly blasted the ancient beast back with a sword. Seeing Xiao Chun make a move, the ruler of the North region's eyes flashed with joy. Finally, he's here, he said with a smile. Thank you very much. Please add me to your collection. Monthly vote. Recommend me. In a chapter. Chapter 3146. Everyone in the North region heaved a sigh of relief when Emperor Dong's palace's reinforcements arrived. This time, the seal had been broken without any warning. It had caught the entire North region and Emperor Dawn's palace by surprise. To the experts of the Northern region, being able to hold on until now was indeed the limit of what they could do. However, now that Emperor Dawn's palace's reinforcements had arrived, the tables had turned. Xiao Chun smiled at the gratitude of the expert from Emperor Dawn's palace. Then, he engaged in a fierce battle with the ancient beast. It was obvious that the expert from Emperor Dawn's palace was at the end of his rope. It was impressive that he could hold on until now, let alone kill the ancient beast in front of him. Therefore, Xiao Chun had to deal with the ancient beast in front of him first before helping him. The situation of the others was almost the same. After fighting for so long, the people of the North Imperial Palace were all exhausted. Therefore, the task of attacking fell to Emperor Dawn's palace's reinforcements. After all, although Xiao Chun and the others had rushed over, almost everyone was in peak condition. They were in a much better state than the experts from Emperor Dawn's palace. Seeing Xiao Chun holding a long sword and slashing out, a terrifying sword edge streaked across the sky, the expert from Emperor Dawn's palace watched on. A single sword strike had left a deep wound on the ancient beast's body. So powerful. Knowing that Xiao Chun was the emperor of Emperor Dawn's palace, the emperor from Emperor Dawn's palace could not help but exclaim in shock. He thought that Xiao Chun's combat strength was at the top of the warlord ancestor realm. He did not expect Emperor Dawn's palace to have someone with such strength. After the initial shock, he could not help but be pleasantly surprised. The stronger Xiao Chun was, the better it was for them. Xiao Chun did not pay attention to the expert from Emperor Dawn's palace. He frowned slightly as he looked at the ancient beast in front of him. Although it had been injured by his sword, it did not seem to be affected. Moreover, there was no blood flowing out from the wound. Instead, a thick green liquid flowed out. Under the effect of the green liquid, the wound healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was so fast that Xiao Chun could not help but be shocked. It was worth noting that his attack was no ordinary attack, as it was infused with Xiao Chun's sword will. Even if a warlord ancestor realm expert was injured by his sword, he would not be able to recover so quickly. Even if he had 10 times more time, it would still be impossible. It was not a problem with the wound, but the sword's sword essence was extremely difficult to remove. However, when it came to the ancient beast, his sword's sword essence was completely useless. This was the Emperor Dawn's palace's palace. Emperor Dawn's palace's palace of heaven's palace. Heaven's shaking heaven's great palace's heaven's palace. Palace Tian. With its huge body, its palm was like a meteor crashing into him. He dodged to the side, trying to avoid the attack of this ancient beast. Xiao Chun lashed out with his sword again, and the blade hit the ancient beast's body again. Its huge body gave the ancient beast an extremely strong deterrent force, terrifying strength, and explosive power. However, at the same time, it also made it impossible for the ancient beast to dodge. In Xiao Chun's eyes, the giant-like body was a live target. Putting aside the fact that the speed of ancient beasts wasn't fast to begin with, even if it was, it wouldn't be able to dodge his attack with such a huge body. But even though it was a hit, the most depressing thing was that this ancient beast didn't seem to care about it at all. Even after being hit, the ancient beast could recover in the shortest amount of time. Such a terrifying self-healing ability was unheard of. As they fought fiercely, Xiao Chun dodged while injuring this ancient beast. However, up until now, the ancient beast was still as lively as ever. It did not show any signs of weakness at all. Moreover, the wounds on his body healed in the blink of an eye. This made Xiao Chun feel helpless. Just as Xiao Chun was feeling helpless against this ancient beast, the North Imperial Palace monarch said as he fought, "If you want to kill an ancient beast, you can't give it time. You have to deal enough damage in an instant so that it doesn't have time to heal itself. Then, you have to destroy its body and extract its core." The core was the source of the ancient beast's power. It was extremely hard and indestructible. Even the Star Lord couldn't destroy it. As long as the core existed, these ancient beasts could be reborn endlessly. Sealing ancient beasts was basically sealing their cores. Therefore, what Xiao Chun needed to do now was to extract the cores of these ancient beasts. That would be considered the completion of the mission. As for the bodies of ancient beasts, they possessed extremely powerful self-healing abilities. The method to extract their cores was, frankly speaking, very simple. That was, you had to deal more damage than their self-healing speed. That was the only way to succeed. However, although it sounded simple, it wasn't easy to actually do it. After all, with such a heaven-defying self-healing ability, one had to deal a terrifying amount of damage to surpass it. Moreover, there wasn't much time between each attack. According to Xiao Qin's estimation, the ancient beast would be completely healed in about 10 breaths. This meant that Xiao Qin had to deal enough damage to destroy the ancient beast's body within 10 breaths. This is an instantaneous explosion. Even a monarch would find it difficult to achieve this. However, now that he knew the method, Xiao Qin wasn't worried at all. Instead, he smiled. I see, but having a method is enough. Among the monarchs in Emperor Dong's palace, Xiao Qin didn't dare to say that he was the best in terms of physical strength, defense, and speed. This was because those who could become monarchs in Emperor Dong's palace weren't simple. Naturally, they were the strongest in their respective fields. However, in terms of attack power, Xiao Qin wasn't inferior to anyone. This was also the characteristic of swordsmen. Among all the ancient martial art practitioners, body-refining ancient martial art practitioners had the strongest defense. Ancient martial art practitioners who cultivated their movement techniques had the fastest defense. Sword cultivators had the strongest attack power. This was publicly acknowledged. As a top expert among the sword cultivators, Xiao Qin naturally had the best attack power. A cold smile flashed across his eyes. Facing the ancient beast's attack, Xiao Qin chose to attack directly. Wait a minute. Seeing that Xiao Qin was going to fight the ancient beast head-on, the monarch from North Imperial Palace hurriedly shouted. Attacking at this time was definitely not a wise choice. He had to deal enough damage in an instant. Now, he had to divert some of his energy to defend against the ancient beast's attack. This was clearly not suitable. Even if Xiao Qin blocked the attack, it would be a waste of energy. In the monarch's opinion, Xiao Qin should first dodge the ancient beast's attack before attacking. Only by attacking the ancient beast's weak points with all his strength could he possibly shatter the ancient beast's body and dig out its core. Only then could he seal it. Please add, vote, recommend. Chapter 31:47. The king from the North Imperial Palace tried to stop him, but it was too late. Xiao Qin's choice was unwise. Under such circumstances, it was a joke to try to destroy the ancient beast's body. With such a terrifying self-healing ability, one could only destroy the ancient beast's soft body by attacking its weak spot. However, Xiao Qin had chosen to fight the ancient beast head-on. It was worth noting that even if Xiao Qin was able to cut off the arm of the ancient beast, so what? It would not take long for the ancient beast to recover to its original state. As long as one could not destroy the ancient beast's body in one blow, it would be meaningless even if one cut off its head. Therefore, the king from the North Imperial Palace thought that Xiao Qin was wasting his energy. However, he did not expect that Xiao Qin would be able to cut off one of the ancient beast's arms in a head-on clash. The star-sized arm broke off with a loud bang. The cut was clean, and it was obvious that it had been cut off in one blow. Now, seeing this, Xiao Qin did not have any intention of stopping. He slashed out with his sword again. The emperor's sword was used. At the same time, Xiao Qin did not end it with just one blow. The dustless sword was waved continuously. Sword after sword attacked the ancient beast wildly. Its huge body could not avoid the concentrated attacks. The ancient beast could only take all of Xiao Qin's attacks head-on. At this moment, Xiao Qin's terrifying attack power and instantaneous explosive power were fully displayed. Every strike of the sword was enough to split the heavens and earth. At this moment, it was like a torrential downpour on the body of the ancient beast. Seeing such a terrifying attack power with his own eyes, the king from the North Imperial Palace was stunned. Was this an attack that a king from the War Ancestor realm could produce? The Emperor's sword was very powerful and could be used as a killing move. However, Such a killing move was like a casual blow to Shao Chun. It did not seem like there was any pressure. That was the truth. After breaking through to the War Ancestor realm, Shao Chen's spiritual power had increased tremendously. As for the Emperor's sword, after so many years of cultivation and perfection, it was no longer the same as before. Although its power had increased instead of decreasing, and it was still incomparably powerful, the consumption of spiritual energy had decreased by a lot. With that, Shao Chun would naturally be able to use the Emperor's sword continuously. Treating killer moves as casual moves, this was Shao Chen's current strength. Facing such an attack, even if a War Ancestor Realm King was enveloped by it, he would probably be heavily injured. However, after recovering from his shock, the King of the North Royal Palace shook his head helplessly. Although the attack was strong, his understanding of the ancient beast was still lacking. Such an attack was indeed enough to severely injure the ancient beast. However, it was still insufficient to completely destroy its physical body. As long as he couldn't completely destroy his physical body and dig out his inner core, all his previous efforts would be in vain. That was why the expert from North Imperial Palace was so helpless. In his opinion, this should be Shao Chen's limit. What a pity. If Shao Chun had not chosen to clash head-on with this ancient beast, and had instead chosen to wait for an opportunity to make a move, he should be able to find an opportunity to attack the ancient beast's weak points. But now, he had to start all over again. There was no time to care about what the king of the North Imperial Palace was thinking. After a series of fierce attacks, Shao Chun could see that he was still lacking a little. Is it still not enough? He muttered softly. Then, Shao Chun held the sword with both hands, raised it high above his head, and slashed down. Emperor's sword. Sword. This was the Emperor's sword that Shao Chun had created on the basis of the Emperor's sword. It was of a higher grade and harder to cultivate. Of course, it was also more powerful. This was Shao Chen's current strongest killer move. As the dustless sword slashed down, a huge golden shadow formed behind Shao Chun. It was a martial artist holding a huge sword. The appearance could not be seen clearly, but it seemed to be Shao Chun himself. The appearance of such a huge shadow shocked many people present. This is someone from Emperor Dong's palace. The people from North Imperial Palace had naturally never seen such a scene. It was too terrifying. How could a War Ancestor Realm King possess such power? From this sword, they seemed to feel a trace of an emperor's aura. What a joke! How could a War Ancestor Realm King unleash an attack comparable to an emperor's? Of course, this was just a feeling. In fact, Shao Chen's attack was still far from an emperor's. But even so, it was terrifying enough. Among the many War Ancestor Realm Kings in the Fire Phoenix Galaxy, there were very few who could possess such strength. Under everyone's gaze, the sword in the huge shadow's hand ruthlessly struck the ancient beast. With a loud howl, the ancient beast's body was forcefully destroyed. Then, a diamond-shaped crystal core appeared where the ancient beast was previously. This is the core. In a flash, Shao Chun grabbed the core. It was the first time he had seen this thing. It did not look special, and there was no terrifying aura coming from it. However, after Shao Chun secretly tested it, he found that the core was indeed incomparably hard. At least, Shao Chun believed that he could not destroy it or even hurt it. No wonder it was said that ancient beasts were immortal and indestructible. This core was really strange. If he could study it thoroughly, there might be unexpected benefits. Putting everything else aside, just the ancient beast's healing ability and the hardness of the core were enough to make it abnormal. Since he did not find any answers, Shao Chun flashed and arrived in front of the king of the North Imperial Palace. After blocking the ancient beast's attack for him, he casually threw the core to him. "You handle it. Leave this ancient beast to me." Everyone's injuries were not light, so it was obvious that they did not have the ability to take down the ancient beast in front of them. Moreover, he was a formation master, so his job now was to deal with the core first. After all, if he did not deal with it in time, the core would soon recover the ancient beast that Shao Chun had defeated. At that time, all his efforts would be in vain. He also knew the priority of the matter, So after hearing this, the king of the North Imperial Palace did not refuse and simply nodded in agreement. Okay, be careful. Until now, he still could not believe that Shao Chun was so strong. He had thought that Yi Shiwen would not be able to succeed, but Yi Shiwen had actually defeated the ancient beast in such a clean and efficient manner. Especially the last sword strike, that terrifying giant shadow, that sword strike that seemed to be able to split the sky. It was a little frightening just thinking about it. The king of the East Imperial Palace actually had such a monster, he really did not know what to say. Begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation. Chapter 3148. Shao Chen's strength shocked many people. Even the North King could not help but take a second look at Shao Chun and chuckle softly. Your Emperor Dong's palace is not bad. He's very strong. Yes, he does have the bearing of an emperor. Facing the North King's praise, the East King was not modest. Instead, he spoke bluntly. Shao Chun was not only strong, but also had great potential. The East King had always thought that Shao Chun had the possibility of becoming an emperor. By then, Shao Chun would be on the same level as him. The North King was slightly stunned, not expecting the old man to have such a high opinion of Shao Chun. However, he did not say anything else. It was not that easy to become an emperor. In the Fire Phoenix Galaxy, there were many talented kings, but how many of them could become emperors in the end? It was not enough to have potential. One also needed great luck. Otherwise, there was no possibility of breaking through. Unaware of the conversation between the East King and the North King, Shao Chun had already started fighting another ancient beast. With his previous experience, Shao Chun was obviously more at ease when facing this ancient beast again. He gained the upper hand as soon as he attacked. It seemed that he would be able to deal with this ancient beast soon. Seeing Shao Chun's strength, the king from the North Palace secretly relaxed. It seemed that it would not be long before they could deal with this ancient beast riot. When the time came, they would just have to wait for the Star Lord to appear and seal these ancient beasts again. Another Emperor's sword shot out the ancient beast's inner core. This time, Shao Chun did not hesitate at all. He grabbed the inner core and threw it to the North Palace powerhouse. I'll leave the rest to you. Almost every king from the North Palace was a formation master and had the ability to seal these ancient beasts' inner cores. Therefore, this matter was naturally left to them to handle. Shao Chun did not know formations, nor did he know how to seal these inner cores. After receiving the inner core, the North Palace powerhouse nodded. Don't worry, he wasn't as strong as Shao Chun, but he was definitely an expert in sealing the cores of these ancient beasts. Seeing that this person had started to construct the array formation immediately, Shao Chun wondered if he had the time to invite Xin Yuanling to the North region. After all, Xin Yuanling knew formations. He could learn many things in the North region, which would be beneficial to his progress. However, this matter could only be discussed in the future. If there was a chance, he would make a trip himself. After dealing with two ancient beasts in a row, Shao Chun did not stop. Instead, he charged towards the other ancient beasts. Naturally, Lin Yun, Lai Wan, and the others, who were helping Shao Chun, were not idle either. They had also defeated several ancient beasts. It was obvious that the people from Emperor Dong's palace were raising the flag of fighting against the ancient beasts. The East Imperial Palace was the main attacker, while the people from the North Imperial Palace were responsible for sealing the cores. The situation gradually reversed. As the number of ancient beasts decreased, Shao Chun and the others naturally had an easier time fighting. However, outside the battlefield, Shao Chun did not notice that there were two figures who had been watching the battle. These two were none other than Xiao Lao and Sword Fanatic. Although Shao Chun had repeatedly warned the two of them not to get close to the battlefield, there was no way the two of them would listen to him, given their personalities. Moreover, these two fellows had many ways to escape. Qin Shru and the other girls had yet to realize that the two of them had escaped from the Star Island and arrived at the periphery of the battlefield. At this moment, Sword Fanatic was watching Shao Chun in the battle excitedly and said with admiration, "Master is so strong. That move just now was really powerful. That's the Emperor's sword, father's killer move. However, it's very difficult to learn it. Even I can't use it now." In response, Xiao Lao explained. He definitely knew more about Xiao Chun than Sword Fanatic. He had tried to learn the Emperor's sword before, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not master it. According to Xiao Chun, his cultivation level was too low. At the very least, he would only be able to master it after he broke through to the ancient era. As for mastering it, it was impossible for him to do so without reaching the divine ancestor realm. Hearing Xiao Lao's words, Sword Fanatic also had a look of longing. He swore that he must learn the Emperor's sword. If he could use such a powerful move, how awesome would that be? He reckoned that no one in his generation would be a match for him. The two little fellows watched the battle in front of them excitedly. These ancient beasts were very strong and could be continuously killed by Xiao Chun and the others. The situation was clear. Basically, the ancient beasts would not be able to cause any trouble. The only troublesome thing was the remaining seals. This was a headache. If these ancient beasts could be killed, there would not be so much trouble in the North region. They could just kill them directly. Unfortunately, until now, no one had been able to do so. Even the Star Lord could not kill these ancient beasts. There was no way to tame them. If they could successfully tame these ancient beasts and make them listen to orders, they would definitely be a great killing machine on the battlefield. Their huge bodies, terrifying strength, and heaven-defying self-healing ability. Although they were slower, they could not be killed. This was equivalent to a group of war gods. Moreover, the relationship between the Fire Phoenix Galaxy and the Azure Dragon Galaxy was very tense. With these ancient beasts in hand, at least the pressure on the Fire Phoenix Galaxy would be reduced. It was a pity that someone had tried this before, but no one succeeded. These ancient beasts were all wild and untamed. Even if the villa was tamed, it would be difficult to communicate with them normally. Once they recovered, the first thing they did was to destroy everything they could see. Therefore, if they could not be tamed or killed, they could only be sealed. He joined forces with Lin Yun and killed another king-level ancient beast. At this point, all the ancient beasts of the Warlord realm had been defeated. They only needed to wait for the seal to be completed. As for the ancient beasts below, they were naturally less of a threat to Xiao Chun and the others. In fact, they were not a threat at all. He casually killed a few more ancient beasts and threw their cores to the people of the North Imperial Palace. Xiao Chun looked at the old man Dong Wang and the North Emperor. Xiao Chun had no intention of getting involved in a battle between rulers. That was because he felt threatened just from the aura emanating from the other party. Even if he made a move, he probably would not be able to help much. The two rulers were too powerful. Even if he used the Emperor's sword, he would not be able to break through their defenses. Only rulers like the old man Dong Wang and the North Emperor could pose a threat to them and break through their defenses. At the moment, only the battle between the Dong Wang and the North Emperor had not ended. Rulers were very difficult to kill. They could not be killed just because they wanted to. Moreover, no one could help much at the moment. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 3149. The king-level ancient beasts of the combat ancestor realm were all dealt with. As for the weaker beasts below, Xiao Chun had no intention of fighting them. On the contrary, old man Dong Wang's combat team was more attractive to Xiao Chun. After joining the Emperor Dong's palace for so long, it was Xiao Chun's first time seeing Dong Wang fight. To be able to become the Lord of the East region, the old man was indeed very powerful. Watching Dong Wang's battle with great interest, Lin Yun, Lai Wan, and a few other kings of the North Imperial Palace came to Xiao Chun's side one after another. With Dong Wang's help, these two emperor-level ancient beasts shouldn't be a problem. At this time, a king of the North Imperial Palace spoke. Previously, the North King was fighting against two rulers. At that time, it was indeed not a match for the two rulers and was firmly suppressed. All it could do was stall for time. However, it was different now. With Dong Wang's help, the North Emperor began to counterattack. Those who could become emperor-level ancient beasts were not simple, not to mention their strength. Although these two ancient beasts were also emperor-level ancient beasts, It was only a matter of time before they were defeated by Dong Wang and North Emperor. If not for their incredible self-healing ability, these two ancient beasts would not have lasted until now. It was precisely because they understood the current situation that they did not have the slightest bit of worry and gradually relaxed. As Xiao Chun watched Dong Wang's battle, his expression suddenly changed. He looked at the void on his left. Previously, as he was busy fighting, Xiao Chun did not notice that the two little fellows had run out and were so close to the battle. However, now that the battle was over, Xiao Chun naturally caught the two little fellows' presence. With their strength, it was almost impossible for them to hide from Xiao Chun's senses. A cold smile flashed in his eyes. Did you really turn a deaf ear to what I said? When we were on Star Island, I repeatedly told them not to leave. However, not long after I left, those two little things likely left Star Island by themselves. Since they liked to join in the fun so much, he would give them a chance. With a cold smile, Xiao Chun turned to the king of the North Imperial Palace and said, "Help me activate the formation." What happened? Hearing this, the cultivator from Northern Imperial Palace was puzzled. He did not understand why Xiao Chun had suddenly activated the matrix. Xiao Chun smiled in response. Those two brats of mine who don't know the immensity of heaven and earth came without telling me. I'll teach them a lesson. Don't worry, nothing will happen. The king of the North Imperial Palace naturally wouldn't reject Xiao Chun's small request. Moreover, the battle was nearing its end. Other than East Emperor and North Emperor, who still needed some time, the battlefield was basically under their control. There was no problem in activating the formation at this time, so the North Imperial Palace expert nodded without hesitation. The array was opened a little, and Xiao Chun smiled at the place where Xiao Lao, the sword maniac, was hiding. Xiao Lao, who was hiding in the void, shuddered when he saw Xiao Chun smile. Not good. Father has discovered us. Then what should we do? They had sneaked out quietly. Now that they were discovered by Xiao Chun, they definitely wouldn't have a good time. Disobeying Xiao Chun's instructions would definitely not end well. Hearing this, Xiao Lao said, "There's no other way. Since we've been discovered, we can only show ourselves." At this point, they could only brace themselves and face it. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Lao and the sword maniac emerged from the void. Originally, the two of them planned to admit their mistakes. That way, things would probably be better. However, Xiao Chun did not give the two of them the chance to do so. Seeing that the two of them had taken the initiative to show up, Xiao Chun waved his hand and immediately threw an ancient beast at the level of an ancient creature in front of them. This ancient beast did not care who its enemy was. It was still fighting earlier, but it was thrown over in the blink of an eye. When it saw Xiao Luo and the sword maniac, this ancient beast let out an angry roar and attacked directly. Damn, is father trying to kill us with a borrowed knife? From the ancient beast's aura, Xiao Lao could already feel a fatal threat. At the same time, Xiao Chen's voice rang in Xiao Lao and the sword maniac's ears. "Since you like it, I'll give you a chance. Don't die." Before they could reply, the ancient beast had already appeared in front of them. Without any mercy, its huge palm pressed down on them. Let's attack together. Facing an ancient beast, Xiao Lao was not stupid. He did not think of attacking alone. Instead, he decided to join forces with the sword maniac. The two of them attacked together and immediately engaged in a fierce battle with the ancient beast. Although the two of them were only world lords, their combat power was extraordinary. Moreover, they were top-notch sky prides. For a moment, under their joint efforts, they were really locked in a fierce battle with the ancient beast. At least they were not defeated directly. However, the helpless thing was that although the two of them could fight against the ancient beast, they could not break through its defense. In addition to the ancient beast's terrifying self-healing ability, the two of them would be exhausted to death sooner or later if the battle dragged on. After all, when the ancient beast fought, it was as if it did not know fatigue. Moreover, its power seemed to be endless. There was no exhaustion at all. They could still fight against it now. However, as time went by, Xiao Lao and the sword maniac would only find it more and more difficult. Seeing that even the young man was struggling in front of the ancient beast, even Lin Yun could not stand it anymore. Aren't you being too harsh? What if something happens? She looked at Xiao Chun and asked. Hearing that, Xiao Chun smiled and replied, Don't worry, nothing will happen. Don't these two little things like fighting? This time, I'll let them fight to their heart's content. Since they like to join in the fun, Xiao Chun would give them the opportunity to enjoy themselves. As for accidents, Xiao Chun was not worried. With him here, the ancient beast would definitely not be able to hurt Xiao Lao and the sword maniac. Just as Xiao Chun thought, as time went by, the sword maniac and Xiao Lao found it harder and harder to hold on. They were constantly being exhausted, and the spiritual power in their bodies was almost depleted. However, the ancient beast was still alive and kicking. There was not even a single wound on its body. Every time, Xiao Lao and the sword maniac tried their best to injure the ancient beast, the wound would heal directly within a few breaths of time. This made the two of them have the urge to curse. How were they supposed to fight like this? They tried their best to injure the ancient beast, but in the end, it healed in a few seconds. This was definitely messing with their mentality. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 3150. Xiao Lao and the sword maniac were being tormented by the ancient beast in front of them. There was nothing they could do about it. The ancient beast that Xiao Chun had chosen was just enough to suppress Xiao Lao and the sword maniac. It was not to the extent that the two of them could not compete with it, but it was also not so easy for them to defeat it. From the beginning to the end, Xiao Chun did not have any intention of making a move. He just watched the two of them fight fiercely with the ancient beast. He looked very interested. As time passed, Xiao Lao, who was feeling more and more uncomfortable, could not help but shout, Father, are you trying to kill your own son first? Even a vicious tiger would not eat its own cubs. Xiao Luo was furious. He had already tried his best, but until now, that ancient beast was still acting as if nothing had happened. It was not affected at all. How could they continue fighting? Xiao Chun did not make a move. Xiao Lao could only shout. Hearing Xiao Lao's words, everyone present was stunned. Then, they could not help but laugh out loud. This kid was quite interesting, especially the experts from the Northern Imperial Palace. They could not help but laugh. They were very curious about Xiao Chun and Xiao Lao. As for Xiao Chun, his face darkened. This rascal was simply shooting his mouth off. In a flash, he appeared in front of Xiao Lao and the sword maniac. In the face of the ancient beast's attack, Xiao Chun pointed his finger. A sword light flashed and directly destroyed the ancient beast's physical body. Its inner core was exposed. To be honest, ancient beasts were still too weak. They were not on the same level as Xiao Chun. After killing the ancient beast in one move, Xiao Chun looked at Xiao Lao with a cold face. It seems like you've been ignoring my words all this time. No, I was just curious. It could be seen that Xiao Chun was not in a good mood right now, and Xiao Luo, who was the initiator of all this, could not help but shudder at this time. How could he not know about his father's methods? Normally, it was fine, but once he was really angry, Xiao Chen's means absolutely terrified him. Initially, he just wanted to watch the show and take a look at this so-called ancient beast. But who would have thought that Xiao Chen would find out? The father and son looked at each other. The sword maniac lowered his head, not daring to say a word. The person that the sword maniac was most afraid of was definitely Xiao Chun. Ever since he became Xiao Chen's disciple, this brat, who had been fearless since he was a child, was both afraid and respectful of Xiao Chun. This time, don't even think about strolling around a northern region, he said coldly. Originally, he wanted to bring this kid to see the scenery of the northern region. But now that things had turned out this way, he decided to forget about it. As soon as he said that, Xiao Lao was instantly discouraged. It seemed like he had to face the wall and reflect on his mistakes again. Xiao Lao wasn't afraid of anything except facing the wall and reflecting on his mistakes. But there was nothing he could do now. You too. Of course, he wouldn't forget the sword maniac. With that, he didn't give the two of them a chance to explain. He turned around and left. Now that the ancient beasts had been dealt with, the battle between Dongwang and the North King had also come to an end. The two emperor-level ancient beasts were naturally sealed by the North King himself. Soon, the finishing touches were done. Dongwang and the North King came to the crowd together. The North King's gaze immediately fell on Xiao Chun. At the same time, he looked at Xiao Lao and the sword maniac who were following behind Xiao Chun with interest. Naturally, what happened just now didn't escape the North King's eyes. The North King was also very interested in the father and son. Although Xiao Lao was indeed a little outspoken, he could see that the father and son were very close. Moreover, Xiao Lao was indeed interesting. Previously, I heard that the Emperor Dong's palace had 2 new challengers. You should be the one, right? North King, you must be joking. It's indeed me. Hearing that, Xiao Chun smiled and replied. Even when facing the North King, he didn't seem too nervous. After greeting him, the North King's gaze fell on Xiao Lao. You're not bad, but now you've been punished by your father. He didn't expect the North King to take the initiative to talk to a young boy. Even if Xiao Lao was Xiao Chen's son, the North King didn't have to do this. Hearing the North King's words, Xiao Lao's eyes darted around wildly. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of a way to get out of this situation. On the other hand, Xiao Chun saw the change in Xiao Lao's expression and sneered. As his son, how could he not know what this boy was thinking? The previous incident had attracted the North King's attention. Now this boy was planning to suck up to him. As expected, as soon as the East King finished speaking, Xiao Lao had already bowed obediently. Senior, you're too kind. I was indeed curious and wanted to see how terrifying this ancient beast was. However, my father was worried about the danger, so he didn't agree. But in my opinion, with Senior North King here, we don't have to worry too much about our safety. Those ancient beasts won't be able to do anything. What a good fellow. The moment he opened his mouth, he started to flatter the North King. But how could the North King not know what Xiao Lao meant? But she didn't expose him. Instead, she laughed. You're just a sly boy. Do you want me to make a decision for you? Hee hee. As expected of Senior. I really admire the scenery of the North region, but my father is now grounded. It's not easy to come here, but I can't see the scenery of the North region with my own eyes. Isn't that a pity? Here it comes. This little brat finally revealed his true intentions. After saying so much, this little brat just wanted to make the North King speak up. The corners of Xiao Chen's eyes kept twitching. He never thought that there would be a day when he would be stabbed in the back by his own son. This little brat actually dared to use the North King to suppress him. Looking at Xiao Lao's sincere expression, Lin Yun, Lai Wan, and the others at the side almost couldn't hold back their laughter. Even the old man Dongwang was smiling. He didn't even forget to wink at Xiao Chun. At this point, Xiao Lao's meaning was very clear. The North King also looked at Xiao Chun with interest. Xiao Chun, this brat of yours admires the scenery of the North region so much. What do you think we should do? Although it seemed like a question, Xiao Chun could still say that. He smiled bitterly and said, That's right. We'll listen to the North King. As he spoke, he glanced coldly at Xiao Lao. Xiao Lao couldn't help but shrink his neck. Seeing such an interesting scene between the father and son, the North King smiled. All right, since they're already here, let's let these little brats have fun in the North region. Now that the ancient beasts have been dealt with, there won't be any danger. As soon as the North King spoke, Xiao Lao couldn't help but smile. What was this called? This was called being smart. At this moment, Xiao Lao couldn't help but want to praise himself. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 31:51. Since the North King had spoken, Xiao Lao couldn't help but smile when he heard that. Now that he had the North King's support, what could his father do to him? The North King and Xiao Chun naturally saw the smile on Xiao Lao's face. Xiao Chun only felt his teeth itching, and his hands weren't listening to him. He just wanted to beat someone up. Looking at Xiao Chen's strange smile, the North King laughed. Since you're in the North region, have fun. As for the rest, you can talk about it when you return to the East region. As he spoke, the North King winked at Xiao Chun. The North King's personality was also unexpected. He didn't have the majesty of an emperor at all, and he gave people the feeling that he was extremely approachable. He instantly understood what the North King meant. They would tolerate him for the time being in the North region and settle the score when they returned to the East region. That was interesting. Xiao Chen didn't really intend to let the two of them go back with their tails between their legs. It was rare for them to come here. After this, Xiao Chen would definitely find an excuse to let the two of them go out to train and travel. Now that the North King said this, his thoughts coincided with Xiao Chen's. On the other hand, the smile on Xiao Lao's face quickly froze. This didn't feel good. Although the matter in the North region was settled, what about when they returned to the East region? They would probably die miserably. You're right, North King. Let's do that then. Ignoring the frozen smile on Xiao Luo's face, Xiao Chen agreed without hesitation. When they returned to the East region, he had to let these two know what it meant to be loved by a father and a master. All right, since this matter is settled, let's return to the North Palace first, the North King said with a smile. After a few days of intense battle, the ancient beast was finally temporarily sealed. As for the sealed core, it had to be brought back to the North Palace first. When the Star Lord came out of seclusion, he would seal it again. Right now, it could only be considered a temporary solution. The array was quickly removed. However, because of the previous battle, the entire starry sky was now filled with spatial storms, and the space was completely shattered. In addition, because of the interference of various nomological powers, the shattered space showed no signs of healing. Only when the power of law completely disappeared would this space be restored to its original state. Before that, this place would probably become a great forbidden area in the northern region. No one dared to casually approach this place. It would take at least a few hundred years for it to recover to its original state. Of course, to the vast northern region, such a forbidden area actually did not affect much. Thus, no one paid much attention to it. After returning to Star Island, they headed to the Northern Imperial Palace together. As soon as he returned to his residence, Xiao Chun saw Qin Shiru and the other girls looking helpless and aggrieved. Obviously, the girls knew that Xiao Lao and the sword fanatic had run away. Seeing Xiao Chun, Qin Shiru blamed himself. Husband, and knowing what Qin Shiru wanted to say, Xiao Chun waved his hand. All right, since it's already like this, let's talk about it when we get back. As he said that, Xiao Chun smiled and glanced at Xiao Lao and the sword fanatic. This glance made the two of them shudder. They would definitely not have a good ending. Absolutely not. Xiao Lao only hoped that when they returned to the eastern region, his father would take into account their father-son relationship and not kill him. The girls were a little puzzled by Xiao Chen's actions. However, when they saw Xiao Lao and the sword fanatic, they naturally taught them a lesson. Qin Shu and Tian Yu directly took action and taught Xiao Lao and the sword fanatic a lesson. Although the sword fanatic and Xiao Lao's strength had actually surpassed Qin Shu and the other girls, if they really fought, the girls would not be a match for them. However, in the face of love from their mother and master's wife, how could the two of them fight back? They could only choose to accept it. Your wings have hardened. I can't believe you sneaked out by yourself just now. What? Just because your cultivation is high, you don't even care about your mother anymore? After a round of scolding, Xiao Lao and the sword fanatic finally caught their breath after they arrived at the Northern Imperial Palace. The king of the Northern Imperial Palace personally arranged accommodation for Xiao Chun and the others. Before he left, he smiled and said to Xiao Chun, "Brother Xiao Chun, the Northern Emperor will personally host a banquet tomorrow. Don't forget about it." Since the Northern Emperor was hosting a banquet to entertain everyone, Xiao Chun naturally had to go. He simply nodded and agreed. At noon the next day, Xiao Chun brought his family to the main hall of the Northern Imperial Palace. Like the Eastern Imperial Palace, as the ruler of the Northern region, the Northern Imperial Palace was also a paradise. Basically, it had everything one could think of. The banquet was held in a peach garden in the Northern Imperial Palace. Under the leadership of the Northern Imperial Palace's king, Xiao Chun and his family arrived together. At this time, many people had already arrived. Xiao Chun also saw Lin Yun, Lai Wan, and the others. Everyone gathered together, chatting and drinking with each other. The wine was the best spiritual wine in the northern region. Ordinary warriors would benefit greatly from just a sip. However, for Xiao Chun and the others, it was like water. The dishes were also exquisite. They were treasures that were rarely seen on normal days. It was no exaggeration to say that everything at this banquet, if placed in the outside world, would definitely be treasures that would cause a sensation. Only an overlord like the Northern Imperial Palace could have such power. Everyone was in a good mood and gathered together to drink. As for Qin Shru, Fairy of 100 Flowers, and the others, they gathered together with Lu Bingning and the other girls, chatting about women's topics. As for the little ones, like Xiao Lao and the others, they had already gone crazy somewhere. Xiao Lao had also thought it through. Since he was going to die anyway, he might as well endure this period of time in the northern region and enjoy himself to his heart's content. Who knew what kind of glory awaited him when he returned to the eastern region? This time, his father was probably really angry. The little ones had their own topics to talk about. Xiao Chun could not be bothered to pay attention to them. Moreover, there were many descendants of the Northern Imperial Palace's kings in the Northern Imperial Palace. It was not a bad idea to let them interact with each other. However, Xiao Chun had obviously underestimated Xiao Lao's ability to cause trouble. After walking around the peach garden, Xiao Lao felt a little bored. After some discussion, they decided to go somewhere else to have a look. Soon, they walked out of the peach garden. They did not care where they were and just wandered around. Finally, they came to a place that looked like a martial arts arena. They saw two young men sparring in the arena. It seemed that both of them were not weak. For a moment, the sword fanatic was also interested. The sword fanatic had always liked to spar with powerful young geniuses. Of course, Xiao Lao was also the same. "Hey, you guys are not bad," Xiao Lao called out, as if they were familiar with each other. Hearing that, the two people in the arena looked over in confusion. When they realized that they had never seen Xiao Lao and the others before, one of them said calmly, "Who are you? How come I've never seen you before?" "That's not important. Do you want to spar with me?" In response, Xiao Lao did not intend to reply at all. He directly invited them to spar with him. Please add, vote, recommend. Chapter 3152. Xiao Lao and the Sword Maniac were both eager to hunt. When they encountered powerful young geniuses, they couldn't help but want to spar with them. Hearing this, the two young men in the arena naturally wouldn't back down. They were the second generation of the North Imperial Palace and were also extraordinary young geniuses in the North region. They were never afraid of being challenged by peers of the same generation. "Hi, you talk big. Since you want to fight, let's do it." One of them sneered and didn't intend to back down. Hearing this, Xiao Lao laughed loudly. "Okay." As he spoke, he took a step forward and instantly appeared in front of the man. He pointed his finger, and the two immediately started fighting. When Xiao Lao attacked, the sword maniac naturally wouldn't stand aside and watch. He locked his target on the other person and also attacked directly. They were just casually strolling around, but who would have thought that these two guys would directly start fighting? Looking at the four people fighting fiercely, Xiao Yao and Jian Yi were speechless. They knew that these two were up to no good. They were already praying that they didn't cause trouble. Are they going to give up? Xiao Wan was speechless. They had already made their father unhappy by sneaking out, and now they were even more unscrupulous. Xiao Yao nodded in agreement. "I guess so. Anyway, we're going to die anyway. Let's have some fun first." Xiao Yao knew Xiao Lao's temperament very well. This was obviously what Xiao Lao was thinking now. Hearing this, Jin Yi, Lin Feng, Lin Shui, and Dong Fong Lin's lips twitched. Good heavens, they were really crazy on the edge of death. They didn't pay attention to the conversation of Xiao Yao and the others. At this time, Xiao Lao and the other three were fighting fiercely. The two from the North Imperial Palace were not weak. In the East region, they could at least be ranked at the top of the Hidden Dragon list. Moreover, the North Imperial Palace was famous for its arrays. As the second generation of the North Imperial Palace, these two were naturally very skilled in arrays. Xiao Lao and the Sword Maniac couldn't help but feel excited to battle with such a powerful array master. After all, There were very few array masters in the eastern region. Among the younger generation, there were no famous array masters. Therefore, Xiao Lao and the sword maniac had never fought with the prodigy of array formations before. Now that they had the opportunity, how could they not be happy about the arrival of these two battle maniacs? Haha, awesome. I didn't expect the two of you to be so strong. Xiao Lao had already drawn his long sword. With an excited smile on his face, he attacked even more fiercely. Xiao Lao and the sword maniac were completely immersed in their excitement, while the two geniuses from the North Imperial Palace were speechless. He thought to himself, what's going on with these two fellows? It's just an ordinary exchange of pointers, but they're making it seem like they're risking their lives. Besides, what was there to be excited about? Naturally, the two of them didn't understand Xiao Lao and the sword maniac. However, facing Xiao Lao and the sword maniac's attacks, the two of them had no choice but to be cautious. Compared to them, Xiao Lao and the sword maniac were not weak, especially their swordsmanship, which made the two of them even more miserable. If they weren't careful, they could be injured. The powerful attack power of a swordsman was not to be trifled with. While Xiao Lao and the others were fighting in full swing, Xiao Chun, who had been drinking in the peach garden, also noticed that the group of kids had disappeared. Previously, he had only let them walk around the peach garden, but now they were nowhere to be seen. I knew it would be like this. Xiao Chun smiled bitterly. He wasn't surprised that Xiao Lao and the others had run away. Now, he just hoped that these two brats would behave themselves and not cause any more trouble for him. He didn't know that Xiao Lao and the sword maniac were fighting fiercely with the second generation of the North Imperial Palace. The atmosphere of the banquet was very lively, especially the North Emperor and the old man Dongwon. They were very peaceful and didn't put on any airs. Everyone drank to their heart's content. As for the other side, after a fierce battle, both sides stopped fighting. After all, it wasn't a fight to the death. Moreover, the two people from the North Imperial Palace wanted to stop, so Xiao Lao and the sword maniac had no choice but to stop. Stop fighting. These two are really crazy, one of the two said helplessly. One of them said speechlessly. Xiao Luo and the sword maniac were like madmen when they fought. A simple sparring match was turned into a life and death battle by the two of them. If they continued fighting, they would probably end up injured. It was meaningless. After they stopped fighting, Xiao Lao looked at the two of them and said, "You guys are not bad. I'm Xiao Lao, and he's the sword maniac. We're from the East region." After the fight, he started to introduce himself. Hearing that, the two of them twitched their lips, but they still looked curiously at Xiao Lao and the others. They were wondering why they hadn't seen them before. It turned out that they were from the East region. No wonder. Xiao Lao and the others were curious about the North region, so the two of them were naturally curious about the East region. Moreover, they were all young people, so they naturally started to chat. After they got to know each other, Xiao Lao asked curiously, "All right, is there any fun place in the North Imperial Palace? And how do you usually cultivate?" There were many cultivation mystic realms in the East Imperial Palace, and the North Imperial Palace naturally didn't lack them. However, the experts in the North Imperial Palace were basically array masters. Therefore, the cultivation mystic realms in the North Imperial Palace were mostly related to arrays. Arrays were completely unattractive to Xiao Lao and the others. They weren't array masters, so the cultivation mystic realms in the North Imperial Palace were completely useless. After a round of introductions, Xiao Lao shook his head in disappointment. It's all array mystic realms. That's really boring. But there's a place you might like. Hearing that, one of the North Imperial Palace's sky prides said. They now knew that Xiao Lao was a complete battle maniac. After knowing Xiao Lao's personality, it wasn't difficult to guess his preferences. Hearing that, Xiao Lao asked curiously, "Oh, tell me, where is it?" "It's the battle arena. There are many criminals from the North region locked up there. These criminals are all extremely vicious. They should have been executed directly, but the North King felt that it was meaningless to execute them. So he built the battle arena so that the people from the North Imperial Palace can challenge these criminals. It's used to train their battle awareness and, at the same time, it's also used to let these criminals play their final role. Fight with the criminals? Of course, this wasn't an ordinary fight. It was a fight to the death. Anyway, these criminals were already dead. Killing them wouldn't make any difference. In addition, the North King made a special promise to these criminals in order to train them better. No matter what the situation was, as long as they were chosen to fight, if they won, even if they killed the people from the North Imperial Palace, they would be released directly. They would even be forgiven for everything that had happened before. In this way, when these criminals were challenged by the experts from the North Imperial Palace, they naturally wouldn't hold back. Instead, they would choose to fight to the death. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 31:53. They knew Xiao Lao and the Sword Maniac's personalities, so they would definitely be satisfied with the battle arena. After hearing about the battle arena, Xiao Lao and the Sword Maniac's eyes lit up. Even Xiao Yao and the others looked interested. There's such a place? There are prisoners of all levels of cultivation? Xiao Lao suppressed his excitement and asked. Seeing Xiao Lao's reaction, the two sky prides from the North Imperial Palace looked at each other and smiled. As expected, they replied, I remember there are a few divine ancestor realm prisoners. The prisoners in the battle arena had the highest cultivation level of the divine ancestor realm. After all, there were not many combat ancestor realm kings, even in the North region. Moreover, once a combat ancestor realm king committed a crime, it would be very difficult to capture them alive. Hearing that there were even divine ancestor realm prisoners, Xiao Lao could not help but ask the two of them, Then what are we waiting for? Let's go now and see the battle arena. The North Imperial Palace did not have such a thing. Xiao Lao even secretly complained in his heart. Old Don Juan, look at you. Why don't you learn more from the North Emperor and let these prisoners use their last bit of energy? However, he obviously could not say this to the East Emperor. He could only complain in his heart. Under the urging of Xiao Luo, the group of people immediately walked towards the battle arena. After this conversation, everyone was very familiar with each other. In addition, Xiao Lao and the others were extroverted and were all young sky prides. They had a lot of common topics to talk about. Only the Sword Maniac was relatively quiet. Soon, they arrived outside the battle arena. Naturally, there were powerhouses from the North Imperial Palace guarding this place. Under normal circumstances, there would be at least one divine ancestor realm powerhouse guarding this place. Secondly, there were many ancient living beings and world lords helping out. The security was very tight. Coupled with the formation, it was basically impossible for the prisoners in the battle arena to escape. That was indeed the case. Ever since the North Emperor built this battle arena, none of the prisoners who were locked in it had successfully escaped. It was naturally not easy for ordinary people to enter the battle arena. But as the second generation, his father or mother were both kings of the Northern Royal Palace. Naturally, he was different from ordinary people. The two sky prides from the North Imperial Palace looked at the holy ancestor who was in charge of guarding the place. They greeted him cordially and introduced Xiao Lao and the others. So we want to enter the battle arena. He just wanted to enter the battle arena and fight with the prisoners. The divine ancestor realm expert naturally wouldn't refuse. They would definitely choose someone they were confident in winning. I'll go first. Xiao Lao naturally didn't decline and directly walked up to the arena. Seeing this, the sword fanatic looked depressed, while Xiao Yao shook his head and smiled bitterly. My brother's personality is like this. Please bear with him. Haha, brother Xiao Lao's personality is not bad. I like it very much. Hearing this, the two sky prides from the North Imperial Palace laughed. Although Xiao Lao was reckless and impatient, they could tell that he didn't have any bad intentions. Getting along with someone like this was naturally better than getting along with those who were scheming. At least you wouldn't have to worry about him harming you behind your back. Stepping into the arena, Xiao Lao looked at the prisoners whose cultivation was still sealed. He casually pointed at one of them. Seeing this, the North Imperial Palace's cultivators pushed him into the formation and undid his seal. After his cultivation was restored, the prisoner didn't waste any time and strode up to the arena. His eyes were filled with ferocity. Without wasting any time, he directly attacked Xiao Lao. He knew very well that from the moment he stepped into the arena, his fate was sealed. He would either win or die. Hence, there was no need to say anything. He just had to fight. Facing the ferocity of the prisoner, Xiao Lao wasn't afraid at all. In fact, he even shouted excitedly, "Good timing. Fight!" With a thought, a long sword appeared in his hand. The two of them immediately engaged in a fierce battle. Below the arena, Xiao Yao and the others watched the battle in the arena. Lin Shui said worriedly, "Is Xiao Lao okay? He seems very fierce. Please add, vote, recommend." End of chapter. Chapter 3154. The prisoners in the battle arena were not easy to deal with. Their ferocious aura made it obvious that their hands were stained with blood. Lin Shui said worriedly as she watched Xiao Lao fight with the prisoner. Although Xiao Lao was strong, the prisoner looked scary too. The sword maniac said with a twitch of his lips, "That person is no match for Xiao Lao," who knew how many times he had sparred with Xiao Luo. With regard to his strength, the sword maniac could be said to know it like the back of his hand. In the same realm, those who could defeat Xiao Luo could be said to be as rare as phoenix feathers and water chestnuts. Plus, from the way they fought until now, Xiao Luo had the absolute advantage in every aspect. No matter if it was strength, speed, or the density of his spiritual energy, Xiao Luo had the advantage that was visible to the naked eye. Of course, these prisoners were locked up in the battle arena. They could not be in their best condition all the time. If there was one thing that the prisoner was better than Xiao Lao, it would be his battle awareness. After all of these villains had climbed out of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. They had experienced countless battles in their lives. Their battle awareness had been honed to perfection. This was what Xiao Lao and the other young geniuses lacked. Perhaps this was the reason why the North King created the battle arena. He used these villains to train everyone's battle awareness. It was obvious that Xiao Lao knew his weakness. That was why he did not use his strongest killer move from the beginning. Instead, he kept fighting with the death row prisoner. Xiao Lao knew that this was a good opportunity to train his battle awareness. If he used his killer move to end the battle, it would lose the meaning of the battle. If that happened, Xiao Lao's battle awareness would not be tempered at all. This was something that Xiao Lao did not want to see. Because of this, the sword maniac was sure that Xiao Lao would be the final winner. He had the ability to kill the prisoner instantly, but he did not do so. Even the North King's palace's experts nodded as they watched the battle in the arena. This brat was very smart. Moreover, he also understood the meaning behind the existence of the battle arena. That's right, this was the kind of battle that should appear in the battle arena. Even if he had the ability to kill his opponent in an instant, he could not do so. Instead, he had to constantly squeeze himself dry so that he could improve in battle. Xiao Lao understood this. In the arena, his figure flashed, and he kept swinging the sword in his hand, clashing with the criminal. "Brat, you're courting death." The criminal naturally guessed Xiao Lao's thoughts and treated himself as a stepping stone. He wasn't a good person to begin with, and now that he was treated like this by Xiao Lao, the murderous intent in the criminal's eyes intensified. He clearly had a killer move, but he didn't use it. It felt like he was being mocked. The prisoner couldn't take it anymore. Dense spiritual energy continuously gathered on his fists. Furthermore, a terrifying killing intent instantly spread out. He was going to use his killer move. Xiao Lao did not let his guard down. Although Xiao Lao didn't seem to be serious usually, Xiao Chun had a saying that Xiao Lao had always kept in mind since he was young. Even a lion uses its full strength to catch a rabbit. No matter who your opponent is, you can't be careless. This was the principle that Xiao Chun had taught Xiao Lao, and Xiao Lao had also kept it in mind. From then on, as long as he was in a battle, no matter who his opponent was or how strong they were, Xiao Lao would never let his guard down. After all, Who knew if his opponent had any trump cards that they hadn't used yet? In the world of martial arts, it was not strange for the weak to defeat the strong. Perhaps there were treasures or tricks, but no matter what the reason was, as long as you were careless, you would definitely pay the price. He suddenly threw a punch at Xiao Lao. Seeing this, Xiao Lao did not dodge. Instead, he slashed with his sword with all his might. The two collided fiercely, and a terrifying force instantly spread throughout the entire arena. Fortunately, there was the protection of the array, so the impact did not spread to the surroundings. After a head-on collision, Xiao Lao clearly had the upper hand. Seeing this, Lin Shui was naturally very happy. It seemed that the sword maniac was right. Xiao Lao was stronger than this prisoner. However, under everyone's gaze, this prisoner knew that he was no match for Xiao Lao, but he still forced himself to fight. If this continued, his entire arm would probably be cut off by Xiao Lao. Is this guy trying to die together with Xiao Lao? That's impossible. His strength is obviously not as strong as Xiao Lao. There's no way he can die together with Xiao Lao. Seeing this scene, Xiao Yao, Jin Yi, and the others started discussing curiously. This prisoner's choice was really strange. Under the circumstances where he knew that he was no match for Xiao Lao, he shouldn't have fought like this. Moreover, he could have dodged, but he chose not to. Just as everyone expected, this prisoner's arm was cut off by Xiao Lao in the end. There was already a difference in strength, and now that he had lost an arm, there was almost no chance of any accidents happening in this battle. Xiao Lao was sure to win. However, at this moment, this prisoner did something that no one expected. They saw that he did not care about his broken arm at all. Instead, he used his other hand to grab Xiao Lao's neck when Xiao Lao let down his guard. If this attack hit, even if Xiao Lao did not die, he would definitely be severely injured. He's bait. Seeing this scene, Xiao Yao suddenly stood up. She did not expect that everything that happened before was actually a self-directed act by this prisoner. He knew that he was no match for Xiao Lao, so he did not hesitate to use his arm as bait in exchange for Xiao Lao's moment of carelessness. This was a gamble, and it was a gamble with no turning back. If this attack did not kill Xiao Lao, then the one who would die would be him. However, such a crazy move indeed made everyone's hearts jump to their throats. Even Xiao Lao's back was drenched in cold sweat. However, his body's reaction was very fast. Just as this prisoner was about to hit him, Xiao Lao forcefully retreated. At the same time, the long sword in his hand was placed horizontally in front of him, barely blocking this prisoner's attack. It was extremely thrilling. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. If he was even a second late, Xiao Lao would probably be severely injured. Phew! Even Xiao Lao could not help but take a deep breath. He was obviously stronger than this prisoner, but in the end, he still ended up in such a dangerous situation. This was something that Xiao Lao did not expect at all. Moreover, who would have thought that someone would use his arm as a wager, all for such a fleeting opportunity? One had to know that this was completely a desperate gamble. If it did not succeed, then the person who would die would be him. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Compared to victory or defeat, the price of losing an arm was nothing, because failure was equivalent to death. So, was the price of losing an arm still heavy? Taking a deep look at the prisoner, Xiao Luo said seriously and sincerely, "I've learned." Hearing this, the prisoner looked at Xiao Lao silently. Obviously, he did not expect him to say something like this. He nodded slightly. Seeing this, Xiao Lao's Jian Yi flashed in his hand, and a head flew up instantly. The prisoner was directly beheaded. He walked down the arena silently. Seeing Xiao Lao like this, Xiao Yao smiled slightly. "Why? Do you feel like you're a match made in heaven? How is that possible? I just suddenly feel that we are still far from Father." From the beginning to the end, Xiao Lao had never sympathized with the prisoner because he deserved to die. Although Xiao Lao learned a lot from him, this did not mean that he would sympathize with him. This prisoner was injured and stained with so much blood. This was a person who did not deserve to be forgiven. The reason why Xiao Lao was silent was because he realized his own shortcomings. He did not know how his father was when he was young. Perhaps his cultivation was not as good as his, and perhaps his combat power was not as good as his. However, Xiao Lao believed that if it was his father at the same time, then that prisoner would not even have the chance to gamble. Unlike Xiao Luo, his father had truly relied on himself to become stronger step by step. Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, and the others have been protected by their parents since they were born. From the upper-class world to the land of infinite stars, and now to the eastern region. They had always been living under their father's protection, and they were too far away from their father. Hearing Xiao Lao's words, Xiao Yao smiled. Needless to say, it was the sword maniac's turn. After watching from below the arena for a long time, the sword maniac could not wait any longer. Compared to Xiao Lao, the sword maniac's combat awareness was obviously stronger. This might have something to do with his experience. As the battle progressed, the prisoners were all people who had experienced hundreds of battles. In addition, their cultivation methods and martial arts techniques were extremely strange, and they had many tricks up their sleeves. If they were not careful, they would be injured. The few of them fought to their heart's content in the arena. On the other side, Xiao Chan was already sitting with the North Emperor and the old man Dongwang. Lin Yan was also with them. The North Emperor was very optimistic about Xiao, Chun, and Lin Yan. In her opinion, if there was anyone among the active kings of Emperor Dong's palace who could try to break through to the Emperor realm, it was probably only Xiao Chun and Lin Yan. Xiao Chun and Lin Yan still had great potential. Moreover, they were at their peak in all aspects, so they had a good chance. However, there are also many dangers within, so you need to be prepared. A mystic realm that even the Northern Imperial Palace could not control. This piqued Xiao Chen's interest. What kind of secret realm was it that even the Northern Imperial Palace could not control? After inquiring about the Northern Spiritual Realm in detail, Xiao Chen finally understood. The Northern Spiritual Realm was a naturally formed secret realm in the Northern region. Strangely, the laws of the heavens and earth seemed to be particularly loyal to this secret realm. Any force that wanted to get their hands on this secret realm would never succeed. In the end, the Northern Imperial Palace tried to take action once, but the result was that the Northern Spiritual Realm almost self-destructed. It could not be controlled by humans. If they were to take action forcefully, the Northern Spiritual Realm would self-destruct. This was the answer that the Northern Imperial Palace came to. However, the Northern Spiritual Realm was quite interesting. Only the younger generation could enter it. The older generation could not enter the Northern Spiritual Realm, even if they were to use force. If they were unable to stop it, the Northern Spiritual Realm would self-destruct. Back then, the Northern Spiritual Realm naturally could not stop the Northern Emperor. However, when the Northern Emperor entered, the Northern Spiritual Realm began to self-destruct. As such, the Northern Imperial Palace could not do anything about the Northern Spiritual Realm. In the end, they could only let the Northern Spiritual Realm self-destruct. Because of this, the Northern Spiritual Realm could be said to be a unique secret realm in the Northern region. Every once in a while, the Northern Spiritual Realm would automatically open and allow people to enter. This caused many of the younger generation in the Northern region to be extremely excited. Recently, the Northern Spiritual Realm was about to open. With this opportunity, Xiao Lao and the others could enter and gain experience. Of course, this would depend on Xiao Chen's choice. After all, there were many dangers in the Northern Spiritual Realm. Every time it opened, many people would die inside. Whether or not he was willing to let Xiao Lao and the others enter and gain experience would depend on Xiao Chun. After all, once they entered the Northern Spiritual Realm, it meant that Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao would no longer have any protection. This was because whether it was Xiao Chun or the others, even the Eastern and Northern Emperors, it was impossible for them to enter the Northern Spiritual Realm, let alone save people in the Northern Spiritual Realm. After understanding the situation regarding the northern spiritual realm, Xiao Chen nodded and secretly thought about it. It was dangerous, but it seemed to be a good place. It was very suitable for Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, and the others. He did not make a decision immediately. Chapter 31:57. The next morning, under the lead of Sword Addict Xiao Lao and Sword Addict Xiao Lao, the group arrived at the battle arena. Although they had been here yesterday, Xiao Lao and Sword Maniac were still very excited. After all, the battle arena was really good. Seeing the group coming from afar, the Holy Ancestor Realm powerhouse, who was in charge of guarding the battle arena, immediately appeared to welcome them. It was mainly because of Xiao Chun. Although Xiao Chun was not from the North Royal Palace, as the king of the East Royal Palace, his status was very high. Moreover, the North King had already said that they must treat the powerhouses of the East Royal Palace with respect. Other than some of the lower levels of the North Royal Palace, the rest of the place could be open to Xiao Chun and the other powerhouses of the East Royal Palace. The Holy Ancestor Realm powerhouse of the North Royal Palace bowed respectfully to Xiao Chun and said, "Greetings, sir. You're welcome. We're also here to take a look at the battle arena." As they spoke, the group walked into the battle arena. Having been here once yesterday, Xiao Lao and Sword Maniac were naturally familiar with the place. "We all want to challenge prisoners of the World Lord level. I want to challenge 2 of them." Without waiting for Xiao Chun to speak, Xiao Lao had already stated his request. Hearing that, the Holy Ancestor Realm powerhouse naturally would not refuse. He nodded and made the arrangements. They randomly picked an arena. Not long after, more than 20 prisoners of the World Lord level were brought up. After sizing up these prisoners, Xiao Chun nodded slightly. These guys were indeed heinous people. Every one of them had a murderous aura on them. It was obvious that they had killed many people. Fighting with such people would definitely not be beneficial. At the same time, Xiao Lao could not wait to rush into the arena. This time, Xiao Lao wanted to fight 2 of the prisoners of the World Lord level alone. Regarding this, the powerhouses of the North Royal Palace did not say much. Anyway, with Xiao Chun, the king of the War Ancestor Realm, these prisoners could not do anything. There was no need to worry. In the arena, Xiao Lao was already fighting with the 2 prisoners. It was indeed difficult to fight 2 of them alone. However, Xiao Chun could clearly see that Xiao Lao's battle awareness had improved compared to before. From the looks of it, the battle arena had indeed served as a training ground. However, it was still insufficient to rely on it alone. How should he put it? Although these prisoners were heinous people, in the battle arena, there were powerhouses of the North Royal Palace. This could not be considered as a real life and death battle arena. For Xiao Lao and the others, if they wanted to improve, they had to go through a real life and death crisis. Moreover, it was a life and death crisis with no one protecting them. They would not die in the northern spiritual realm. Moreover, this kind of life and death training was what Xiao Lao and the others needed the most. As for Qin Shiru and 100 Flower Fairy, they were silent and did not give an answer immediately. The 2 girls thought a lot and were even more worried about their safety. After listening to Gu Lingyao and the others, Xiao Chun looked at Qin Shiru and 100 Flower Fairy, waiting for the 2 girls to answer. Faced with Xiao Chen's gaze, the 2 girls were silent for a moment before speaking. "I'm worried about their safety. However, just like what the sisters said, Xiao Lao and the others do need this kind of life and death training." "Yes, I think so too." Qin Shiru and 100 Flower Fairy agreed with everyone's opinion. Seeing this, Xiao Chun made a decision in his heart. That was to let Xiao Lao and the others go. Although there was a possibility of them dying, as a warrior, how could they not experience some danger? Moreover, with Xiao Lao and the others' strength and the life-saving methods that he had prepared for them, even if they encountered some danger in the northern spiritual realm, it should not be a problem for them to protect themselves. Therefore, even if they encountered danger in the northern spiritual realm, the possibility of Xiao Lao and the others dying was very low. Therefore, it was natural for them to go. After making a decision, Xiao Chen nodded and said, "Yes, then it's decided. In the next few days, I will refine some life-saving items for them. It might be useful if they encounter danger." Xiao Lao and the others must learn to walk out of the protection of their parents and go out on their own. Only then can they transform. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 3158. In the end, Xiao Chen decided to let Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao go to the northern spiritual realm. Of course, as for Lin Feng and Lin Shui, it would depend on Lin Yun's intentions. Moreover, Lin Yun also knew about this matter. In the next few days, Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, and the others would go to the battle arena whenever they had nothing to do. Of course, they also went to the other secret cultivation areas in the Northern Imperial Palace. However, compared to other places, they were more interested in the battle arena. In the Eastern Imperial Palace, these little guys had seen all kinds of secret cultivation areas. Therefore, the secret cultivation areas in the Northern Imperial Palace were not very attractive to them. They were happy to see these little guys go to the battle arena. After all, fighting with those prisoners could indeed improve their combat awareness. It could also be considered as preparation for entering the Northern Spiritual Realm. On the other side, Lin Yun also came to find Xiao Chen and asked him about his views on the Northern Spiritual Realm. Xiao Chen naturally did not hide his decision and told Lin Yun about it. Hearing this, Lin Yun thought about it and agreed with Xiao Chen's idea. She planned to let Lin Feng and Lin Shui go together. There was still a month before the opening of the Northern Spiritual Realm. Xiao Chen and Lin Yun naturally refined a lot of life-saving items and planned to give them to the boys. In the Northern Spiritual Realm, they could only rely on themselves. Even if Xiao Chen and Lin Yun knew that they were in danger, there was nothing they could do. On this day, Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, and the others returned from the battle arena. It was already evening. As soon as they entered the courtyard, they saw Xiao Chen, Qin Shu, and the others waiting for them. They took the initiative to go forward. Seeing this, Xiao Chen opened his mouth and said, "I plan to let you enter the Northern Spiritual Realm." The little guys naturally heard about the Northern Spiritual Realm. After all, this place was too famous. Moreover, there were many young geniuses in the Northern Imperial Palace who planned to enter to gain experience. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Xiao Lao and the Sword Maniac were naturally very excited. These two guys didn't seem to know what it meant to be nervous. As long as there was a challenge, the two of them would rush like ducks. Or rather, the more afraid they were, the more excited they would be. "Really?" Xiao Lao asked in disbelief. Xiao Chen scolded him angrily. "Nonsense, all of you come here. I have something to tell you." He handed over some of the life-saving items that he had refined a few days ago, as well as various types of medicinal pills to them. He prepared 6 sets for Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, Xiao Wan, Sword Maniac, Jian Yi, and Dongfeng Lin. Xiao Chen would not be biased in this regard. Furthermore, the things he had given them were all true treasures.